Like I have the technique.
Let's talk about this in a thorough way.
I think I just navigate it and eventually.
Okay, go ahead.
Do it, but I.
All right, I'm gonna call our June instruction work group to order. And I'm gonna start with, for public input, we do have some speakers tonight. But before we go into those who have registered to speak, I'm gonna summarize the written statements submitted for this meeting. There were 32 written statements, 29 in support of bell-to-bell cell phone ban for K-12, and 3 in support of the cell phone ban during the school day, except for during lunchtime. And with that, I will move it over to our public appearances.
Just one second. Our first online speaker is Amy Martino.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you to the board members who have agreed to meet about the proposed cell phone policy. I realize that to many of you, I probably come off as a privileged parent who won't stop ranting at school board meetings. So I'd like to use up a precious minute to introduce myself. I was a women's studies, history, and journalism major at UW in the early 2000s. I learned a lot about checking my privilege, and I continue to work at checking it every day. It is because I care about outcomes for all students that I'm so passionate about this issue. I can easily prevent my own kids from having phones at school, but I want there to be a policy that protects all kids. As an MMSD kindergartner, my son did not get the literacy instruction he needed to learn how to read because the school board dragged its feet in embracing the science of reading. I did the research and figured out the problem and paid for a tutor to help him. He is now a voracious reader, but I was worried about his classmates who weren't as fortunate as he was to get extra help. When I brought up the idea of spending a large literacy donation on tutoring to my son's former principal, he immediately dismissed it because he was concerned about equity, that not all students would be able to stay after school for tutoring. A year later, I pitched the idea of free volunteer tutors to my son's current principal. She heard me out, and we figured out a way for students to get tutoring during the school day. That community tutoring program is now in its second year and has given many disadvantaged students one-on-one reading help. I volunteer my time recruiting and organizing tutors, and I also tutor students. I'm bringing this up because I fear this board is dragging its feet on much-needed change in the name of equity. There was one phone ban study in Florida that showed increased suspension rates, especially among Black students. But suspension is not part of MMSD's discipline plan. Also, in that Florida study, discipline rates leveled off in the second year and attendance and test scores improved. Prohibiting phone use during passing periods is actually the most equitable policy. Requiring students to store and retrieve phones between every class would increase the chances of disciplinary issues and bias in enforcement. The UW student survey found that low-income students are more likely to use their phones for safety or emergencies, but the presence and distraction of phones actually makes students less safe in an emergency, and encouraging students to record bullying is deeply problematic. Phone access will not solve equity and safety problems. The phones are actually exacerbating equity and safety problems. And finally, there is a good chance a bell-to-bell amendment to Act 42 will pass next year, and money spent on phone storage for every classroom will be wasted. Please give a stricter phone policy the chance to improve school climates. It is possible with phone storage before first and fifth periods, yonder pouches, or a phone locking app. There's a growing coalition of more than 100 parents who are asking for this change and willing to help make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next online speaker is Jackie Shore.
Hi, sorry, I'm trying to start my video. Okay, if it's okay, I will just speak. Is that okay? All right. Hello, members of the school board. You probably know what I'm here to talk about. Policy 4404, specifically cell phones in high schools. I have presented research showing that banning cell phones from schools improves test scores and attendance rates. I've talked about a successful away all day policy in this district. I've provided you with 40 pages of comments from high school teachers within the district, most of them asking for a stricter cell phone policy. I've reached out to all of you, asking if there is more information I can gather and to have a discussion so I can better understand your hesitation at having a strong policy. I have provided evidence that an away all day policy at the high school is what is best for students and teachers, and yet here we are. This draft is not a significant change from the policies already in place in the high schools, and you know those don't work. You know that because you discussed the discrepancy in behavior referrals that already happen in MMSD. You know the existing policy isn't working because you have 40 pages of teacher comments telling you that it isn't working. And yet you are going to allow high schoolers to have their phones between classes. Some of the largest school districts in the country, including Milwaukee's, have away all day policies at the high school level. The UW-La Follette study recommended an away all day policy in order to limit the opportunities for referrals. Several members of this board are concerned about discrepancies in discipline referrals, and yet this board is still looking at a policy that allows students to have their phones between classes, giving every teacher in every class the responsibility of disciplining students who have their phones out. Storage in classrooms is a fight for teachers. Storage outside of classrooms is worse. No one will be able to monitor the storage, and when a student is asked to put their phone away, they have to leave the classroom. There are other solutions like Yonder pouches, apps, or full school storage locations that make sense and will solve many of the problems that you discuss. You're going to say there isn't money to purchase Yonder pouches for every student. Actually, there is, or there could be. You approved an expenditure for more than $500,000 for new Chromebooks for first graders to come out of the 25-26 budget, and yet the district recommends 0 minutes of screen time for first graders. That is $500,000 for technology that the district itself recommends does not get used. The cost of Yonder pouches for every student, which will last as long as a Chromebook, by the way, is around $160,000. So, you could stop purchasing technology that isn't even supposed to be used and replace it with storage that would allow students to keep their phones, which would prevent the potential for phones to be stolen and allow families to feel comfortable that their student actually has their phone with them. And you would still have over $300,000 to spend on things that matter, like teachers. I want to discuss this further, but really what I'm asking for you to do is what is right for high schoolers and do not allow them to have their phones during passing times. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final online speaker is Jeremy Atkins.
There we go. Hello, everyone. I am a parent in the district, currently with 5 kids spanning elementary through high school. I have grave concerns over the saturation of the school day in technology in general, and specifically want to add my voice to the many, many others opposed to proposed policy 4404. I've received multiple emails from teachers at Memorial over the last 2 years, highlighting the problems students are having keeping phones away. I've heard from my son, who is at Gillespie, that phones are commonly out and in use during the day. It is hard to fathom that the crafters of this policy reviewed the experience of the last year and concluded, yep, this is working, let's keep the status quo. Because that's exactly what 4404 is. It continues a failed, broken policy that harms students and is devastating to teacher morale. First, let's all acknowledge that often away policy is really just an away policy. Very few students are actually going to turn their phones off during instructional time. That means students are getting distracted by notifications when they should be focused on what is happening in the classroom. Studies have shown the mere presence of a phone nearby affects a student's cognitive capacity, making it even more difficult to concentrate and learn effectively. Second, an often away policy only for instructional time turns teachers into phone police. You have heard feedback over the last few weeks about how much teachers hate this, how some of them consider quitting their jobs. Why are we okay with this? How is forcing teachers to spend instructional time getting students off devices an acceptable use of those valuable minutes? Third, only forbidding use of devices during instructional time is woefully inadequate given what we know about the effect of phones and social media on anyone, but especially adolescent brains in particular. Passing periods and lunch add up to 20% of the school day. Why is it acceptable for 20% of a student's day to be spent on a device that demonstrably wreaks havoc on attention spans and ability to focus and causes mental health problems? I implore the administration and the members of this work group to enact a policy that physically separates students from their phones for the entire school day. That is what our students need and what our teachers deserve. Imagine a student being able to walk into the school and know that for the next 7 hours, they don't have to worry about distractions, but can focus on learning. They don't have to worry about missing out on online conversations. Instead, they can engage with the friends right in front of them. Imagine teachers being able to do what they love instead of policing the classroom. You have the opportunity to make this reality. You can choose to follow the example of many other districts and entire states that have enacted a bell-to-bell policy. If you care about students and if you value your teachers, please reconsider this misguided policy. Thank you.
All right, thank you to all of our registered speakers and those who submitted written comments for tonight's meeting. We are now going to move into approval of our minutes. I move to approve the minutes from the instruction work group meeting dated May 4th, 2026.
Second.
All right, Board Member Muldrow, thank you. Claire, your advisory vote.
Aye.
All right, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
All right, that looks like 7 of us. Thank you. Okay, for tonight's meeting, we're gonna start with the third read on policy 4403 and policy 4404, possession of a wireless communication device. These are coming back to us tonight as third reads. And we had our most recent conversation on both of these policies at our board retreat on May 22nd. And where there was a lot of questions from board members was really around the high school implementation. And so because of that, we did ask the admin team to invite in a couple of high school principals who are going to share with us some of what they're doing currently and then take any questions so that that can inform our discussion around the third version of the policy. So we're going to start with that. The principals have kind of a limited time with us tonight because they have some standing school commitments, I believe. So we want to honor kind of their limited availability and then open it up for whatever discussion we want to have. And then the second topic tonight is to have an introduction of our family, youth, and community engagement. So just remember, board members, we have 2 topics tonight, policy, and then going into family, youth, and community engagement. And with that, I'll turn it over to Superintendent Gothard or to Dr. McRae.
All right, great. So first and foremost, good evening, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to be here with you again. So as always, we like to start with our vision for our district, which is MMSD will be a learning community where all students are valued, challenged, supported, and inspired to reach for their dreams. We also recognize that we have our mission statement where MMSD creates a safe and inclusive schools, delivers high quality instruction, strengthens positive relationships, and partners with families and communities to achieve student self-determination and educational excellence. As Chair Nichols stated today, we're super excited to have our family, youth, community engagement department here where we can talk about the last part of that mission and how we're engaging with our families. We have our guided commitments as well. So as we stated, tonight we will go into our third read. So for the wireless communication device, so there are 2 policies that we'll go through, 4403, as well as a new policy, which is 4404. Before we get started, we would like to bring onto the screen Matt Hendrickson, which is our principal for Phillips Memorial High School, and Matt Thompson, which serves as our principal for La Follette High School. My ask is that each of these principals kind of give us kind of an overview of where they are and how they're implementing their current policy, implementations that they are currently doing. And really, I think we wanted to hear from them around how they handle and support students when they do engage with students who have phones, and as well as how they're considering the implication of phones in the hall. So with
And if they can, Dr. McRae, if either of our principals can also just touch on, yes, they're doing certain things, And based on the new policy language, could they highlight what would be different, if anything, regarding implementation of the new policy?
Correct.
All
Yep.
right, thank you.
All right, so with that being said, we'll start with Matt Hendrickson first over at Val Phillips, and then Matt Thompson. So why don't we take about like 5 minutes for each one of you, just kind of talk that through. And then once both of them are finished, we'll open it up to allow for board members if they have any questions for those individual principals. And then after that, we can go into the read of it once we have those conversations. So, Matt?
Okay, good evening, everyone. I just want to preface this, that the policy that we're currently operating under right now is something that we came up with our faculty and implemented this fall for the first time. And basically it is similar, I think, to the current policy that's being proposed, where students are off and away. And the way it operates in our building is that teachers are asked to give a general announcement, that phones are put away. After that point, if a phone is out, our support team is called and one of our behavior support people come and confiscate the phone. That phone is then kept in the dean's office until lunch period, if it's in the morning, or after school, if it's an afternoon pickup. Along with that, then we have communication with families. There's an email that's sent home to kind of communicate with families to let them know that this happened during the day. And, as far as I think, was it Nichelle was talking about the hallways? We are not in the point where we are doing anything with our hallways, so students do have access to their phones during hallways and lunchtime, but should be put away during instructional minutes and class time.
Do you want us to just take questions per principal or let both?
I think let both of them. go
Okay.
ahead, just because there might be some comparison in there if you want. So,
Okay,
Mr. Thompson.
Sure, thank you, TJ, and good evening to our board members as well. So at La Follette, we took kind of a different approach, and the sort of like premise of how we wanted to roll judicious cell phone use out in our classrooms was building on what was happening in the middle school. So we know that middle schools were experiencing levels of success around their locker storage policy. What we did during the 24-25 school year, we purchased phone homes for all of our 9th grade teams for students to store their devices in the classroom. The following year in 25-26, we purchased this year phone homes for all of our 10th grade core teams, and the plan was to go building wide in 26-27 with some type of classroom storage. We do not have as robust policy as Memorial does, which Memorial is taking phones away. That would have, I guess, as we look at the current law as it's proposed, that would have to be like our next step. I will say overall that depending on the teacher investment that I've seen and the ability to a teacher to manage phones and work with kids and build the culture in their classrooms to use the phone homes, we do see pockets of success with that. The biggest concern that I have amongst staff, as well as I also meet with our multicultural student team. Those are affinity group leaders from all of our affinity groups. So I meet with about 20 students around school policy. And they also note the inconsistency amongst teaching staff in terms of implementing a codified policy. So that's currently where we're at. And, there is extensive follow-up, but it's, I can't tell you that it's highly efficacious right now until we maybe take steps around, like what Memorial is doing, around separating the student from the phone for periods of time. So that would be like our next step with the policy as it's constructed. So again, the premise was to build on what was happening at middle schools and hoping that would carry over. It's been a mixed bag, I'm going to say that in all fairness to our board members.
thank you so much.
Yes.
All right, we'll open it up for questions. And I'll get us started if you all don't mind. Board colleagues, just kind of building off of our retreat. So right now, the current policy version that we have says that at the high school level, devices must be turned off, stored, and not accessible, or be in secured classroom storage at the start of the day and then start of the class rather, and then retrieved at the end of the class. And I'm wondering, can you all, and then we had quite a bit of discussion about when a student doesn't necessarily want to do that, right? How does that progress? So I'm wondering right now, if a student shows up in their class, they're asked to turn their phone off, put it in this storage, and they don't want to do that. What I think I heard Memorial say is that you all then call for behavior support and the phone is removed and taken to the dean's office until lunch or the end of the day, depending on what time. And La Follette, I think you said you're not necessarily taking the phone away right now. But can you just elaborate a little bit more on what is happening if a student is refusing to turn off or secure the phone in the classroom after like 1 or 2 reminders?
Yeah, there's no reminders. So there's a broad statement at the beginning of class, and after that, they should be off and away. And if they are out, then the teacher just makes a phone call. The teacher doesn't have to do anything else. Behavior support comes and will work with the student on that cell phone.
Okay,
And-
okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Board Member Nichols. I was just gonna, the antithesis to what's happening at Memorial, when a teacher does call, behavior support does follow up, and we work with the student, try to coach the student, try to come to an understanding about keeping their phone off and away, and then return them to class.
Okay. And in this one then, Principal Thompson, you're saying that if we went through with this version of the policy, you see the next step as having something built in where the student and the phone are separated?
Yeah. So again, I've been consistently meeting. I have a group of very interested teachers, about 20 teachers who I've now met with 3 times around developing a tighter approach to cellular devices, as well as my student team. Board Member Nichols, even my students see the need for some limitations to their phone. It's really interesting. So even my students are articulating that. And where the rub is with students, this is interesting, is the notion of the phone being away from them, right? So they can live with off and away. This is according to my students now, right? They can see a policy where they can live with off and away kept in their backpack or possibly like a wall chart, and know that as a result, after a first infraction of this, right? There's the coaching and support, and then it's just like what Memorial's doing. It is then periods of separation from the device. But first and foremost, I think we want to stress that we want to really. This is an opportunity, I think, to create just a level of awareness with kids. Kids were shocked to know that there was a state law on the horizon, right?
Mhm.
And like we need to concentrate on like how we're supporting responsible use of devices to me, how we control our cell phone usage and cell phones don't control us, and teaching that level of agency, I think is important to me too, in this as well. So I want to be really thoughtful about that. And also coaching up teachers on being very consistent. And also students know that, listen, after you've been supported and warned, you will be separated from your phone. That will have to be reality. So that's like my current thinking around this.
Thank you, I appreciate that. All right, I got us started. I'll go with Board Member Van Millen.
Very simply, I can see, I prefer LaFollette's approach, but I can see the benefits of Memorial's approach. I'm still for it for passing time. I am still on it for lunch. I want those exceptions. My biggest thing on all of this is very consistently that one, it can be used in emergencies, which it can. Two, that disability usage is worked on. Yes, it can. And disproportionality. And that's where I have the problem, is because our BEP says it's that repeated infractions in this policy, it says repeated infractions shall be punished according to the BEP. A repeated level 3 infraction, which is would be, leads to suspension. That's what I cannot get my brain to do. If there's a sentence that says you can't be suspended for it, I'd be fine with doing it today. But that one I cannot get past. But that's me. I think you've both done an excellent job, and thank you for telling how it works in your school. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Next I'll go with Martha and then I'll move to Claire.
Thank you, Chair Nichols. And sorry, I don't have my video on. I can't remember my password. I had to change it recently. So here we are. I was wondering if just before I switch over to questions for the principals, could someone speak to what we do or what is the closest model followed in elementary and middle schools?
So at elementary, this really hasn't becoming a thing, so there's not a concrete policy because for most of they're kind of doing something a little bit different. Some of our elementary principals say like they know their students have phones, they just make them give them the phone at the beginning of the day, and then those students come back at the end of the day to collect those phones. So it very much varies because this haven't been an issue for us. Across our middle schools, I want to say starting the 22-23 year, all of our middle schools kind of got together to adopt the very same policy where they are off and away all day throughout the class periods and instructional time, including lunch, except for one of our schools that does currently allow students to have access to their phone during lunchtime at the middle school level.
I'm gonna say that, like, I'm for having more of a bell-to-bell model at those two levels. The high school one, I know it's like that one I'm a little like pause on what to do there just because you have different access to it, but I don't like how the phones are constantly like they're built to get your attention. And so with the high school principals here, I think like what the teachers are probably aware of, if you have the phone on your person, you simply have it in your pocket, it's still like it could be silence, but still be like capturing the student's attention. Just because it's just might still be going off. What does off and away mean? Like,
Is that
how do you even like yeah.
is that what you wanna ask them a little bit more about, like
The expectation of what is off and away?
yeah, I think. Can either one of you all answer that? Like right now, the language says devices must be turned off. What exactly is off? I don't know if that's some question.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I can speak to the fact that if it's at all noticed, heard, seen, that's considered violating the policy. We are not going around and checking to make sure that they've turned their cell phone off.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Matt.
Okay. To piggyback on Matt's point, like, I know that throughout many of the comments from parents and board members, many of you are familiar or read Anxious Generation, and we know the astounding number of alerts and messages that come across the student's phone each and every day. I would concur with Dr. Hendrickson. We would want to make sure, do an announcement that phones are truly powered off and put away, giving student agency on where that might be. Right? Is it in your backpack? Is it in a wall chart? But the phones are powered off.
Right. Okay. I wanted clarification on that. And I'm wondering if either Can either of you speak to, do you do any PD around phone use with staff and more specifically around like drills and like emergency situations? Because some of the reason that some parents might be sending their kids to school with their devices is because they want there to be able to get a hold of their kids, because we don't have, as far as I'm aware, there's not really something that's district wide that says during a drill, an adult in the room will have a phone on their person, but silenced completely, so they can still be the person, they have someone has communication with students in spaces when safety drills are being done. Is that something that like, where are we with that, I guess? I don't know who can speak to that.
So I'll ask our principals just to first talk about just the level of professional development. And then if neither one of you have anything, I think I can jump in on the piece about safety.
And do you mean professional development on educating teachers around how we're going to implement the cell phone approach?
Or
Professional.
what you're currently doing, Matt. So like, what has been your current level of professional development for your teachers, if any?
Yeah. So what we try to do with teachers who ask, right? We have a common understanding, and we began the school year with how we're going to approach cell phones and make that behavior support call. That is really the extent of the expectation for the teacher. If they're struggling with the student in the class, as I've surveyed my staff, you know, the overwhelming theme from the survey has been their fatigue around what they feel is the constant battle, if you will, the constant amount of redirects it takes for students to put their phones off and away. That is probably the biggest challenge that I see. So I can't tell you, we've had robust staff development around supporting teachers on the implementation of the plan.
I don't, Thompson, if you have any, I'm sorry, interest in anything about professional development for your staff?
I wouldn't say necessarily professional development, just making sure that we have communication across the board with both our staff, students, and our families. So beginning of the year, you know, kind of outlining the plan so everyone's on it, knows exactly and the expectations. But as far as professional development, I think we did things similarly for the last couple of years where it hasn't been wonderful. And the idea here was for us to take it out of the teacher's hands as much as possible and allow them to teach class. And so they're just making the one phone call and that's it. So not a lot of professional development around that. I guess coming back, I can speak to the safety. I believe there's a concern about when we're doing drills. Yes, their teachers may have cell phones, but for the most part, we have actually in every classroom, we have a phone. So if during a drill, there's a situation or an issue, we do have a classroom phone that's available.
But that's like a landline.
Yes.
That's a landline. And I think the other thing around when we've talked about safety is that if there was a significant issue and everyone's using their cell phone, oftentimes cell phones are not useful because they get locked up and the system gets bound up.
Yeah, and our own security team at MMSD has mentioned that multiple times. And as I listened to parents, I also surveyed parents at La Follette, and we did a really good job of working with my BRS team and MSC to really get a cross section of parent involvement in the parent survey. And you know that is mentioned in terms of like in emergency situations, they want to be able to get a hold of their Lancer. And to Matt's point, you know, when that does happen, that actually creates an unsafe situation.
When the phone is on student or
On. Go ahead.
I'm trying to, I want to clarify and creates an unsafe situation when the phone
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, because it's my understanding when you have a barrage all at once in a certain location of some of the cell phone signals, as explained to me, that actually inhibits the use of the device.
So when you're doing a drill, do people go next to the landline phone in the classroom?
No, it depends. Right, that depends on the drill, right? The fire drill, we're evacuating the building. If we're in a secure, right, like we're out of sight.
So I also think one of the things that will need to happen is once we have this policy in place for our Office of School Safety to now begin to review the policy and how we're implementing drills, knowing that phones are not off and away, to begin to have those intentional conversations so that they can embed it within some form principles of when you are doing drill, you also want to consider if your phone is away, what is the process that we want to have that can be taken on by the Office of School Safety.
I think that's something that I really want to see, like what intentional safety things are being done and how that's communicated to parents. As opposed to just not knowing exactly where that currently lies and looking at the pros and cons and things that happen within those types of situations. What can be accessed, what can't, and expectations of where people physically are going, depending on the type of drill and what's around them. And why. And I don't know, if when we are talking about what Nikki had referred to, when the different levels of what happens when,
Board Member Serrano,
yes.
just for the purpose of the principals having a
Yeah.
amount of time. Do you have any questions for the principals, or can you wait and hold that question until we open it up just about the solid policy conversation generally? Because I want to make sure we've got several hands raised, and I want to make sure anybody who has a question that they want to ask to the principals, we can get through that
We
queue.
can keep going around, maybe it'll come up with one.
Okay, appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, I'll go with Claire next, and then over to Ali.
Awesome. Thank you, Board Member Nichols.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring in just like a little bit student perspective and just some student questions, I guess. Principal Thompson, I know you mentioned something about your 9th graders and 10th graders having like phone homes in the beginning of their classes. Could you walk me through a little bit of what that looks like? Is it like the Yonex pouches, or like is it like just like a phone caddy?
Yeah. So the phone homes that we purchased are they're like boxes like yay big like this with slots for phones. And so teachers go about this one of two ways, right? Because we have some teachers that use this very efficaciously, that as soon as kids walk in, right, they're by the cell phone home, right? And kids are walking in before they sit down, and they put their phone in the cell phone home. One of my teachers likes to be on a cart, and he's right outside his classroom door, and as kids walk in his room, they put the phone in the cell phone home case, and he waits out there till passing time ends, and then begins teaching.
If there's any pushback from the students, what does that just follow the BEP plan, or like how does?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we've not suspended for cell phone infractions. Okay. It's trying to teach and coach. That's what we're trying to do. We have, right, what the policy is, we're implementing it where there's some holes, is we're not taking the next step like Memorial is in terms of like separating the student from the phone. And that would be the next step. We'd make multiple phone calls home to families to try to get support and partnership around cell phone use. I also think what's inadvertently happening is teachers are just getting tired of the battle and not calling. That's more and more what I'm seeing as it currently exists.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
All right, sorry, I had gone to first name basis for a moment, so excuse me if anybody's feeling any kind of way. Let me go to Board Member Muldrow, okay?
You know, okay. I want to thank you both for joining us this evening. I want to ask first, so a teacher asks a student to get off their phone or to put their phone away. That's the first step, correct?
Correct.
What are the rest of the students doing when the teacher makes this request?
Just for clarification from our standpoint, it's a general to the entire class. It's not an individual. It's just all right, class, we're gonna get started. Make sure your phones are off and away. And then that's it. Then we start going.
Okay, so every class, we're starting class with an announcement about our phones. And like we're at the movie theater. Then you get to an individual student who takes their phone out, or you get to a few individual students who have their phone out. Is the teacher then saying, hey, I need you to put your phone away to those students?
Not at Bell Phillips. At that point, they just make a call and we will bring behavior support.
Okay, what are the students doing while they make that call?
Probably still on their phones.
Okay, what are the students who are not on their phones doing while that teacher makes that call?
I'm not sure in every class, honestly. I mean, I'm assuming that they're trying to carry on with the rest of the lesson.
Okay, so just thinking about this from my vantage point, the teacher stops delivering instruction, stops paying attention to the students who don't have their phones out, goes and makes a phone call, and their entire focus for that period of time is getting support around the student or students who have their phone out.
I think.
Well, when I've come to pick up the phone, usually I'll walk in and the teacher will be teaching and I'll just knock at the door and they'll say, hey, so-and-so has their phone. I'll call so-and-so over. Hey, I need to have your phone. They hand me the phone and I take it down to the deans. So the teacher actually continues to teach after they make that phone call.
Okay,
So the teacher role is just all they're doing is simply pick the phone call, say I need support, and go right back to teaching. And then when that support comes, they're the one having to engage in the conversation with the student.
but you do understand that it's like a little bit of a mixed message to say it is okay to make a phone call during class and it's not really that big of a deal or that much of a disruption. Like, that doesn't send at all a mixed message to the students if we're saying, hey, we need you to be off your phone so that we can focus on learning. But then instead of focusing on learning, we're focusing on the students who have their phone out. And we're making a phone call to address that. I'm not trying to be weird. I'm just saying, to me, that feels like it's sending a really complicated message.
It's to comply with the instructional time of the policy and trying to develop a way to create healthy routines and habits so that we can minimize and eventually eliminate that interaction from even taking.
Okay. One of the other things I think is complicated about that is if I'm in class and I'm really focused and then my teacher stops class and makes a phone call, I'm gonna take out my phone. I'm actually gonna take out my phone while she's on the phone, right? Like, I'm gonna start doing something else because now we're not talking about math anymore. We're not talking about history anymore. My teacher is focusing on the person in class who has their phone out. And I would imagine this happens relatively frequently. So that's my first question and the first area where I think I find there to be some tension around what we're paying attention to. And I think about this from my own experience. I'm too old to have gone to school with cell phones for real. But I remember being on time for class and teachers not starting class until the people who were late for class got to class, and then spending 5 minutes berating the people who were late. And I had been sitting there for 10 minutes feeling like this was insanely pointless. Like, this is a waste of time. And I don't know what the incentive is for the people who don't have their phone on, is to sit there and watch somebody else get in trouble for their phone on a routine basis in class after class. Feels like that's not the dynamic we want to encourage. And if there are tools for us to avoid that dynamic, I want to embrace those tools. My second question is, what about our students who are parents who need to be available to their daycare or childcare? So in our high schools, we have students who have young children and are responsible for those children, just like the adults in our buildings. How do we accommodate that reality for those young people?
Is that a question for me?
Yes.
Yeah, we have
I assume you
individual,
both.
we
You
have
both
individual
have students.
we have
Yeah.
individual circumstances, whether it's for medical reasons, childcare. We have situations where the teacher and maybe counselor, whoever, have worked out situations and they're well aware of, certain kind of out of the norm needs, and we work around and support those.
Okay, so I think we've talked a lot about disability, and I feel really confident that this policy and the conversations we've had have highlighted that if a student manages their insulin using their phone, we're gonna make sure they can still do that. We haven't talked about teenagers or young people who are parents in this conversation, and I just want to ensure that our approach is considerate of the lived realities of our students and their families. Thank you for speaking to that. I'm gonna start with you, Principal Hendrickson. Students, have you noticed any trends related to teacher behavior? Do all teachers report cell phone use on all students consistently? Or are you seeing some teachers be more likely to reach out for support, and certain students be more likely to be targeted for discipline? If part of this policy is based on what we notice, how do we make sure that we're not targeting specific populations that we associate with bad behavior?
Yeah, I can't say that I've noticed that. Certainly, to Mr. Thompson's point, different teachers enforce it at different levels, but I can't say I've noticed anything.
So you haven't noticed whether or not there are inconsistencies or consistencies or racialized trends related to enforcement of rules?
I mean, I guess I haven't, I can't speak to that because I'm not going around and doing all the cell phone collections and things, and I'm not in the classrooms. I would say by this point in time at this year, and we kind of know, the students that are going to struggle with our cell phone use, by and large, many of our students have kind of bought into the program. And I have not broke that down.
Okay. I guess, because we've heard a lot of information that says there's a racialized enforcement of these kinds of policies, I'm gonna ask you the same question, Principal Thomas. Have you noticed any trends in terms of who gets in trouble for having their cell phone out? And have you noticed, any trends around your teachers, who is more likely to ask for help related to cell phones? Or is it kind of consistent across the board? All teachers are, reprimanding students for cell phone use, and that's pretty evenly spread across student demographics.
Yeah, to your latter mentioned point, Board Member Muldrow, what I see is very inconsistent calls to actually very few calls around cell phones. That doesn't mean that it's going swimmingly in classrooms. It's just that teachers have sort of have made the choice as to not to engage the student and allow the student to use a cell phone while they're teaching. So that's more of like what I'm seeing.
I guess I want to hone in on the fact that all of our data has shown that our students of color are more likely to get in trouble, or more likely to get in trouble more frequently, specifically our African-American students and our African-American male students who live in poverty and have disabilities are kind of our most likely group of young people to get in trouble at school. And so I'm curious about why this cell phone policy would work differently. And if we don't notice when that's happening, if we don't notice, hey, this teacher consistently sends out mostly their African-American students for using their cell phones, and what we hear from those students is that actually everybody's using their cell phones, it's just certain kids get in trouble for it and certain kids do not. And so I guess if we're not noticing that and we don't have a way to reconcile that adult behavior, I'm really concerned about some of the negative implications of the approach we're taking. And it would be hard for me to vote in favor of what we're currently looking at, because I think it would reinforce some pretty negative and racialized phenomena. I do want to say that I agree with the speakers who came tonight. We need to address this. And where I find myself struggling is I heard both the idea that we're dragging our feet and doing this too slowly, and the idea that what we have in front of us tonight is not what we should go with. And so the fastest thing to do would be to go with what we've got in front of us tonight. But I am interested in having a highly effective cell phone policy. And I don't think what we have in front of us tonight is that. And I think we need to continue to work on it. Really grateful for your contribution to the conversation, Principal Thomas and Principal Henderson. Thank you so much, Chair Nichols.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
I just wanted to do a time check because I know you all both, Principal Hendrickson and Thompson, you all have somewhere you need to be. Can you tell us how much time you have left with us this evening?
I could be with you all night, Michelle.
Well, hey.
I have a program. I probably have about 25 minutes left.
Okay, so you want to say like by 6:15?
Yeah, 6:15.
Okay.
Can I just address the last comment from Board Member Muldrow? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Dr. Hendricks and I have been asked to comment on like how things are going and what hypothetically things would look like given the policy that's been articulated, right? We haven't talked about like what would be on Thompson's wish list or Hendrickson's wish list with this, right? Like in terms of like, we know in the anxious generation, what that book puts forth is what we heard, the most efficacious policy is external storage, right? And no access to a phone all day. That's what the research in that book suggests, and that's not what we're talking about tonight, though.
Thank you.
All right, we have three more board members. Do each of you have questions for the principals? Vice President Mosner Feltham, okay, and President Castro? Okay, so there's three of y'all splitting up about 25 minutes, so just in full transparency, do your best. Okay, we'll go with Vice President Mosner Feltham.
Thank you, and thanks for being with us. I've been really eager to hear your thoughts. I suppose my questions are around what does it take as a school to stay on this over the course of a year? I suppose this is a question for Memorial, for Principal Hendrickson. What kind of, I mean, board member Strabo sort of asked about professional development, but I don't quite mean like formal professional development. I mean, when you think about like the energetic expenditure that all the adults in the school are putting towards their work. What does it take for all of the adults at Memorial to be like, this is our quest? What does that mean for what you are able to do better? What does that mean for what you're not doing, given that you're prioritizing this? Can you speak to that a little bit?
I would say, we made a commitment early on. So the first month and a half was, that was what we were doing. I would say maybe today we probably got 5 or 6 phones out of close to 2,000 students. So I don't think I think it's, again, this is new this year, right? So the culture around this is still relatively new, but we're in a state where, and again, we're end of the year, so there may be teachers not making the phone calls, I'm not sure, but we're not getting, 40 phones a day.
Were you initially?
Yeah, initially I would say we probably were. Yeah, the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Again, to Matt's point, our freshmen are coming in with a different awareness of cell phones. So it's, juniors and seniors that are, just not used to it, used to having their phones out a little bit more. So, initially, just like anything else you're implementing, you got to have all hands on deck. And then hopefully if you're doing that well, you don't later on.
I will say to piggyback on that, we are planning, this is going to be a significant culture shift, right? And this is going to take a significant amount of support from, all of my floor team, your administrators, and this is going to be, our point of practice for the first couple months of the school year. That's going to be that investment.
That's what I would imagine, is that it
Yep.
is a significant investment at the outset. And then I would also imagine that as teachers start to get tired,
Right.
talking about myself too,
Yep.
like what kind of resources does that require? And I'm thinking about like, if my administrator came to me and was like, well, Blair, you just gotta stick to the expectations. And I'm like, there's so much more to it. And so I have concerns about, not about being able to do it. I have concerns about, as usual, where in our professional development and our professional learning and our expectation setting for a school as a whole, are we balancing this thing against any other things that we might want to do? And then my second question, again, Principal Hendrickson, the progressive disciplinary matrix that's like currently in this third draft of the policy seems to me like less strict, I guess is the word I'll use, than what's happening at Memorial, because this actually has the teacher confiscating the cell phone or the wireless device, I should say, in the class for the class period. So that to me seems like a step backwards from where you're at. Is that your sense too? Like if you had to say, no, we're not like dispatching our behavior response team, there's not additional support, it's like happens, level one between the teacher and the student. Is it your sense that would be a step backwards for where Memorial is at now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily a step backwards, but it's certainly something that we've done in the past. And again, trying to alleviate that as minimum classroom disruption as possible and not have the teacher and the student get into any kind of power struggles. We kind of tried to take that off the teacher's plate so that it was a mobile response person that was handling that.
Can I interject to one thing? It's just a reminder, the purpose of having that in there is for those who have nothing.
Okay.
Right? Because what we want is just to have a little bit of consistency to like be able to, but schools can do more. So more decide like, hey, ours is already working for us. It is totally fine for them to keep going in that trajectory. But for those schools who's like, we have absolutely nothing. We haven't been doing this at all. Then here's an.
Well, that confuses me though, because if we have a district-wide policy that says this is how it goes, but a different school is saying, actually, no, our second occurrence is this, that feels like a problem to me.
Because remember, the one thing that we said is that for the policy, this is the floor. And they're allowed to go above the floor in order to, we could just.
And I just wanna, I love
Those are my questions for
the principals, and then let's pick this back up. Is that okay?
Yep, sure.
Okay,
I thank you for your answers and for your work.
all right. We'll go with board member Pearson and then President Castro.
Hello, Principal Thompson and Hendrickson. Nice seeing y'all. So I frequent your guys' schools, and so I'm kind of keen somewhat of how things kind of go, and my daughter attends Memorial. So, and thank you, Board Member Muldrow, for your comments because they were very similar to mine in terms of like, are we seeing trends around like the same student or groups of students who I guess are getting their phones taken, and then what the mechanisms of tracking are. And what I hear is that we're not tracking that necessarily yet, but then what would tracking look like at a high school when you have, 1,500 to 26,000 students in your school?
Well, I think it is being tracked, but I mean, it's just parents are getting emails home when the phones are confiscated. I just don't know what those numbers are.
Okay. As always, I'm always thinking about how do we analyze, whatever we do and then analyze and figure out the best way to make it better. And so it'd be great to start getting information around that. But I do want to lean into Principal Thompson's comments about, we want to make sure that students are using their cell phones in responsible usage and agency building with students. And so if you can talk to me to your point of like, haven't asked the wish list or anything, but can you talk to me just about what that might look like for you all to build the agency for the student? And I think and I'll have comments for later
Sure.
this conversation.
Board Member Pearson, thank you for the question. So I mentioned that I have a teacher team around this and a student team around this. And then this Friday, I'm bringing actually both groups together over lunch so we can actually develop a shared understanding and perspective around what this is going to look like in classes. Like I mentioned, students also see this as a concern, right? So I think we have a golden opportunity with the advent of this legislation to say like, hey, this is our reality. We're here to support you. Parents, I did this parent survey, like I mentioned, and parents themselves see a need for some limitations around cellular phone use during the teaching time. My parents want to see their kids available for learning. They also want to be able to communicate with their kids, right? So that are like all the tensions that we're holding. Maybe I'm overly optimistic, but I believe that I think we can support students in a way that really, first and foremost, very explicitly, they understand what the expectations are in the classroom. We as staff have to implement that with consistency and follow up. I don't necessarily see this as a question of suspension because I think in and of itself, separation from the phone is your teachable moment. And I think students will get that. So I just want to make sure that we maintain faith in our students because I believe they can do this. I think I haven't expected it like I need to at La Follette, and I understand what I need to do to make some adjustments in this, but I also want to partner with the kids and co-create something. So they have some ownership in this too. And it's going to take the community as well. I think I'm hoping from MMSD on down, once we coalesce around whatever approach it is, it's communicated out clearly to families and the why around this. And that first and foremost, that we want to see improved academic outcomes for everyone.
Thank you. Principal Hendrickson, I don't know if you want to answer the question. It's just about leaning into building agency for the young people and building responsible usage and wish lists kind of thought of like what that might look like and what is necessary.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have a wish list, but absolutely, I think, working with our students. And again, I would say in the beginning of the year, we had, students, I think that felt really good about not having to have their phones out. And it was an excuse not to, like, because we had this in place, students didn't feel the urge that they had to have their phones out. So I think again, it's kind of building that culture that we're here for the instruction in the classroom, and the cell phones are something that you do at another time.
Thank you so much. And then my last question is just for the principals is that, so these policies are wireless communication devices. It is not a cell phone policy. Although cell phones are part of the policy. In here, we also have earbuds, we have smartwatches, we have, like the headphones, anything that can transmit Bluetooth or in some way work with the wireless settings. So that being said, how does that kind of fit into both of your guys' schools and enforcement around this? Especially like my kid wears their headphones all day, but may not be music on there, but he wears them all day. What would that look like in a school if this is to be enforced?
Yeah, I don't think we've gotten to watches yet, but we certainly had earbuds and things that they've become on or used or not put away. Those are certainly something that we would confiscate. But we have not gotten to watch yet. I don't think we do that yet.
Principal Thompson, I don't know if you want to answer.
Well, I wish I could, Board Member Pierce, but I can't on one level because we haven't gotten as far as Memorial with that. I mean, that is also a concern too, but.
Okay, well, thank you. And I guess my last comment is just, just from the different schools that, and I think I mentioned this at our retreat, schools across the US that have enforced things like this, they say, and I think it fits into what both you spoke about tonight, of like the difference of enforcement or difference of implementation with how some teachers relate to some students and the relationships. And what we know is that over the US, with many different schools, no matter if they've had the policies in place for a year or two or 5 years or whatever, the issue always comes back to the enforcement. And some schools enforce it for a couple years and then it starts to lax. And so I do love the fact of leaning into the building of agency and buy-in by our students with our students, because I think that that's more long lasting than us trying to dictate directly, this is what you have to do. So that's it for me. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, President Castro?
Thank you. First of all, Principal Thompson, you said something that I really appreciated, that you think our students are up to the task, that they recognize the importance of this and can embrace the challenge. And I think we should generally as well. Two or three really brief questions. I'll just say them all at once. First, specifically with Principal Hendrickson, can you talk into just estimation how many calls you have per classroom when the teacher calls and asks them to confiscate the student's phone? Like, how many of those calls happen per day? The second question is, what have y'all done individually or even shared practices to promote like a positive, affirmative culture around healthy cell phone use? Yeah, and then can you talk about the challenges about trying to set consistent expectations and practices with teachers? Principal Thompson, I believe you mentioned that it can vary teacher by teacher, classroom by classroom with the cell phone use.
Dr. Hendrickson, you gonna go first?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of numbers. Again, it started out, I think we may have had, I think beginning of the year, we may have had 60, 70 calls one day, first 2, 3, 4 weeks of school. Now I'd say it's single digits. Maybe if it's an odd day or whatever, coming off of a break, you might get some double-digit calls. As far as that usage, and again, we have, probably 9 people that are available if needed during the day. We just all kind of team together, and whoever's nearest by the room can go help out. As far as we haven't done any lessons thus far. We had a few early on, but in our morning announcements every day, it's a reminder, about focusing on instruction and making sure our phones are off and away during the day. So there is a daily reminder as well as, before each class. So I think they're certainly getting, maybe it's too much. Maybe it's become where they're not listening at all, but it's daily.
So real quick, the person responding to the class phone call isn't always necessarily the same person on the walkie?
No, it's
Okay.
whoever's available. It might be myself, could be an AP, could be a dean, could be a social worker, whoever's, kind of in the area to help out.
From LaFollette's perspective, Board Member Castro, again, like I mentioned, our teachers aren't really calling for cell phones right now, so I can't give you a number on that. I've been thinking a lot about how we want to create a positive culture around this. I know that we're already planning summer work with this teacher team to create both family and student communication, and it also must include student-generated communication to students. And East is was also probably going to be partnering with us on that, the teacher groups to get together, creating student communication, family communication, student-to-student communication regarding this. And also I want to think, as I previously mentioned, to send a message that like how you store your phone and how that looks, I think can be driven by the student. There's agency involved here. We want you available for the learning. As this is currently written right, you're able to check your messages and communicate during passing times, and you get to your next class and that phone is off and away. And yeah, the biggest challenge that we have to overcome, that we have to work on, is going to be consistent implementation with teachers. And that also means, though, that we have to have consistent follow through and follow up to support teachers. So that those two have to go hand in hand. So that really the onus is on your admins, deans, floor team, and everybody.
President Castro, I'm sorry, did you have any other questions?
Yeah, I guess my last question that wasn't answered was the challenges with setting consistent classroom expectations teacher to teacher.
I recognize that as an issue, and when I was meeting with my students, they also discussed the confusion, if you will, around what the cell phone approach looks like in one teacher's class and what it looks like in another teacher's class, right? So as we move forward into next year, that has to be squarely addressed. So all staff have equal ownership of whatever policy is developed. So that has to be like a part and parcel of the professional development that we're going to need to do going into 26, 27.
All right, thank you.
I know we're right at, oh, I'm sorry, were you going to speak, Principal?
No, I was just going to say, I mean, we've had that conversation too about leaning into classrooms, maybe that are struggling a little bit more with that, just to help support and help coach teachers through that.
Hey, Principal Hendrickson, before you jump off, I'm gonna just ask one question, and it's based on the questions that I've heard tonight. Which is right now in the policy that we have in front of us, it says that at the K-8 level, no phones all day. But at high school, we're saying it's okay in between classes and at lunch. And so I'm curious if at the high school level, it was to be no phones all day, period. Could you all implement that?
I think it would depend on what that looks like. If you're saying every student comes into the beginning of the building and just puts their phone in a locked locker and picks it up at the end of the day, again, you're talking about 2,000 students. It's just a lot of logistics. If you're talking about us having to manage hallways and lunchtime with phones out and then try and hold students accountable during that time, I think that would be difficult. I'm being honest with you.
I would agree with that, Michelle. That would be an incredibly arduous task.
So again, because I feel like a lot of some of the comments that we're hearing are that we should be K-12 district-wide, like no phones. If you come in with them in the morning, they're locked somewhere and you don't get them at all during the day. And so I just wanted to hear from you all, like at the high school level, when you have 1,500, 1,600, maybe 2,000 students, how that could be implemented. And them not getting it during passing time, not getting it at lunch, like literally locked away for the whole day.
Yeah, I think based on the fact that we're so close to food establishments during lunch, I'd be hard pressed to believe that parents would be okay with students not having their phones while they're out at food establishment off campus.
Okay, so because of the open campus lunch that we have at the high school level, you think that would be really challenging?
I think from a parent perspective, absolutely,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure. I mean,
okay, I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot, and it's a big question right at the end, but I just wanted to hear you all yeah, just hear your reactions to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why we don't keep the phone for the entire day. We keep it before lunch and then at the end of school, because we know at lunchtime, some students are running quick to their job to pick up their paycheck, or they're doing this, and they're out in the community.
Thank
And
you.
again, board member Nichols, like, my parents' survey revealed that parents want to be able to communicate with their kids. So that's understandable. And I believe in the anxious generation, where this has had success is when entire communities are behind this, as I recall. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
No, you're right.
Okay. Thank you so much. President Castro, is your hand still up for another question?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify their answer to your question. So that would be for a full day. What about just for during lunch? They have the exception where they check their phone in at the beginning of the day, they get it at lunch, then check it back in at the conclusion of lunch.
Again, I don't know that I'm opposed to the concept. It's just the management of 2,000 people going and getting their phone or picking their phone up. Where is that happening? How is that happening? And if they don't put it away, what's happening then? If I've got two phones and I put one away, but then I use my other one, there's just a lot of logistics around that.
Yeah. I also agree with that. That's very difficult to monitor. I also think it might lead to students leaving class trying to get to their lockers, and I just don't see how that's really enforceable either.
Appreciate that so much. President Castro, are you okay? All right, thank you all so much for your time. Principal Hendrickson, hope you have a great program tonight. I know Principal Thompson, you said you could hang out with us all night long. Do you want to?
All right, take care all. Thank you.
Appreciate you. All right, good night.
All right, thank you.
All right, appreciate you, board colleagues, for us getting through a round of questions with the principals. I don't know, Dr. McCray, are you wanting to kind of point us out to any more recent changes in the two policies, or?
You could put that slide.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you so much. All right, there you go. All right, so there's been two changes that you see here, and one I'm gonna kind of speak to. That's an update. So in policy 4403, after our last conversation, we identified and made sure that the term earbuds was included in there. So that's been the major change from the last time.
Okay.
And then for policy 4404, the major change has just been the update from based upon our last conversation, which was to make sure to add the language centered around field trip. The only thing that is not in here right now, and thank you, board member Saravo, we met this morning. It's one piece that I actually needed clarity from board member Saravo. We met this morning, and so I am following up on that, but it's about the ADA piece of it.
Okay.
And what we just want to make sure of is, one, what is our current process for students who do not have an IEP, who do not have a 504, who need ADA accommodations? Where is that housed and documented? Identifying that first, and then determining if that needs to be the standalone or if it needs to be in the policy.
Okay.
If it does need to be in the policy, it will be considered under the exemption for number 2, where we are adding the language of it or ADA compliant. We are not adding in number 3 because of the word that says required there. So that's why it's not going to be listed next to IEP or 504. So that might just be a wonder why when we just put it there, but because it says required, we're not going to place it there, but instead where it says under exemption number 2, we will add the language there. So we'll work on that to make sure, as I said, board member Sarava met today, that was just that we'll be able to get to, and so that's what we got. So those are the only updates and changes that we have for both.
Okay, great. So, just as a reminder, we have to vote on these policies by the end of this month in order to meet the statute's requirements that we have policies approved by July 1. This is the third draft of each. And so I guess we can open it up now to see if there's any other, oh, yeah.
I just want to add one more thing. So thank you for that. And just as a reminder is, because this came up the last time, when board member Feldman had the conversation, the exemptions that are here, remember, those are the exemptions that are called out in the statute. So I just want to remind everybody, those are like exemptions that we are just saying that we want to have. Those are the exemptions that the state statutes say we must have in there.
Okay.
And so as a reminder, I just want to make sure to lift that for everyone.
Yeah, so why don't, I guess we could spend a certain amount of time to either uplift any language issues that we still have, any questions that still feel like they haven't been answered. I'm wondering if we wanna spend limit our discussion for a certain amount of minutes. Okay, Member Malcolm?
I don't have an opinion about a time limit related to the discussion. I do have a question about kind of policy committee's role in this, and policies committee's role. And then my other question about it is about the progressive discipline matrix that's been included. So I've said on multiple occasions, I don't want progressive discipline to be applied to this policy. I would prefer something that is not punitive, is not punishment, is not negative reinforcement, and that engages with the reward systems of our students appropriately. Are you all hoping that I, as a board member, bring in what I would like to see as an alternative, as an amendment to this policy, rather than any kind of collaboration between us and the administration?
If I might, Board Member Muldrow, tonight you've heard 3 different approaches to this very topic. You've heard one school that there is no warning, it's just an immediate call and confiscation. You've heard one say, you know, we really don't have anything. And then you've seen as it's presented. I think if we're, you know, and we have a lot of behaviors that fall under discretionary subjectivity. There is students who swear. Swearing is in our BEP. It's in the past code of conduct. And yet I don't think it's anyone's expectation that every word you hear in a hallway, you're confronting. You know, I don't think that happens routinely. So I think we have to give some guidance so that, you know, we don't turn perhaps the first time someone has a cell phone in an instructional area into that level 3 or level 4, you know, violation or infraction. So I think we're trying to give some guidance and some progression so that it doesn't turn into serious offense if somebody makes a mistake or feels like they absolutely have to have their phone. So I worry about.
Can you provide me with any evidence that that is a highly effective way to behaviors? So we have students who show up late and you get a tardy, or you have students who have attendance. Is there an example where you can say, hey, once we reprimand a student using progressive discipline, they're less likely to do it again? Or once we get to step 2 in progressive discipline, is there any evidence that progressive discipline really works in terms of changing the behavior of students?
I don't know that I don't know that progression, the way this described, I would have anything empirical to say, but I can say that somebody that says, you know what, I'm not dealing with this today, just leave. A student might leave for the entire school day, not just that class. So that's where, if there's no progression of working with, providing support, perhaps there's a reason why a child or student has a phone, and, you know, look for that kind of connection. I just worry in the absence of it, we could get in situations like that where it's binary.
Yeah, I think that that's an interesting thing to compare, right? So if you compare the group of students who get in trouble to the students who don't, and you say, hey, this is an absence of negative intervention, negative reinforcement, which group of students are doing better in our district? The students who get in trouble a lot, or the students who don't? From every piece of data you all have ever presented to me, what it suggests is that the students who get in trouble continue to get in trouble more frequently, and suffer academically in relationship to getting in trouble on a regular basis, and that those students are really aware that other students, look different than them are engaging in the same behavior and not getting in trouble. So I hear what you're saying in terms of we need to have a response. I want a response that we can rely on to work effectively and engage students academically with a great deal of intentionality and that does not recreate the same racialized and hostile dynamics in relationship to punitive punishment that we already have. And so I don't want this to be a new opportunity to do the same thing. I don't want headphones to become what hats were to my generation. Because we all know who got in trouble for hats, and we all know that like it didn't make anybody a better student to like fixate on that for specific populations of students. It became an excuse to engage in a relationship that was about dominating a student, and you can't dominate and force people into learning. And so I have expressed a lot of concern about this, and yet it keeps coming back. And so the other part of my question is, are you hoping that if I don't want to vote for this portion of it, that I say, here's how we're going to amend the policy, and here's what positive reinforcement or incentive-based approaches to this work that engage with our students' award system can look like?
If we were to, if I could just for a moment, if we were to remove that, pretend that entire, imagine the progressive disciplinary matrix is absent, it's gone. It's not even there. Put your hand over to what have you. Where in our current policies and practices would you say that if a child has their phone and they're not supposed to, what would the response be?
I think that's what I'm trying to ask about is like, I can generate a response that is based in positive reinforcement in relationship to good behavior. And I can say, hey, you know, I want to amend this policy to include the pouches, and I want to amend this policy to, you know, engage with students in a really specific way. I don't actually think of that as being how the board usually engages beyond policy committee with policy. But is that what you all are hoping? Are you hoping that if board members don't like this portion and say, we do need a response, it just doesn't need to be progressive discipline, that we come up with the alternative, that we say, this is when we're going to do restorative justice related to this. This is when we're going to do, you know, a celebration of kids who have streaks related to not having their phones out. Like, are you looking for us to create that, or does our administration have the capacity to approach something and have an intervention that isn't based in progressive discipline?
For me, it's the first thing. Like, I'm just like me and Martha have met to correct that. I'm willing to work with anyone and be able to engage that. I myself personally have looked for some positive reinforcements, particularly to around there. And there's only one thing, but that one thing requires students to still have their phones.
Okay.
Right. So there is an app out that rewards students for not being on their phones, but it's an app on the phone that rewards students for not using it during the time. Because this is, again, it's like that kind of new thing. It's going to be a while before we begin. I do think we will begin to see more things like that. But just right now, there's an absence of it, but I'm willing to.
So I would like us to be on the forefront of that. And if that's something we can work on together, I think that it's something that we should fully embrace. And I hear folks saying, hey, it was more disproportionate in terms of discipline in the first year, and then less so in the second year. That's not a real like accurate descriptor of how disproportionality and discipline works, right? So you're either eliminating disproportionality and kids, no matter what they look like, are seeing the same enforcement of the policy, or you have a persistent relationship to disproportionality, whether it decreases or increases. It's still a very obvious marker of who gets in trouble and who doesn't. And it's not something I think our current system can afford to reinforce in a new way. And so I appreciate the opportunity to follow up with you about this, because that is the part of this policy I'm not going to vote for. That's it for me, Chair.
All right, thank you. All right, I saw Board Member Vandermeulen's hand up next, and then we'll go to Vice President Mosner-Felta.
Yes, I 100% agree that we need a positive, progressive way. I'm more of a reward than a punishment. I look forward to doing that. And I think that might take more time than we have. So I think of a compromise. One, that we still do that and work and continue to work on that. Nellie, I'll be thrilled to help you with that. In fact, you're probably a better writer than I am on that. But B, instead, put a simple statement in the policy. You cannot be suspended or expelled for repeated cell phone offenses. It's cleaner. It's easier. That doesn't take away other things. It says just like how we don't suspend in in the elementary school. We don't expel for this. We don't suspend for this. That's all.
All right, thank you. Vice President Mosner Feltham, and then Board Member Saravo.
Thanks. Thank you, Board Member Muldrow, for consistently surfacing what we know about how students are actually relating to these super addictive devices and how we might support them with that. I would be eager to see what you anything else come up with about an alternative to the progressive disciplinary matrix. It's not that it's fun. Okay, so I'm gonna start over. Is there any provision or potential or universe in which we might pass a policy more or less like this for a period of time? We have policies that we update annually, and I don't want to update it annually, but I do think that even as the deadline approaches, the statutory deadline, and even as like the deadline for getting ready for whatever we're gonna do next year approaches, I want to be continuing to work on this. I'm curious about how it will go and what we'll find out about what the policy needs to be or how it needs to be changes. So I'm curious about whether or not it would be possible to adopt this policy for a time period, for a year. That's something that we could do and then return to it as we learn more.
Absolutely, because remember, as the board, you have the authority to review policy as you see fit. So
For sure. I mean, I guess I know that like we could come back to it. Do you have any sense of like
potentially we might be coming back here next year to have a different conversation about this policy, depending on what happens with the next bill.
Okay.
So there's potentially a bill that might say that we might have to go K-12, no phones, period. So we might be back here anyway next year, depending on where we land with that.
That's sort of where I'm at. If we take care of the sort of concerns around the progressive disciplinary matrix and the top, sort of like where students top out on like being confronted with punishment as a result of this, I think that I could vote for it at the end of the month, with the intention of continuing to learn and changing it for the following year. And the reason I say that is because it still feels like it's not different than what's happening. And I know the logic is, well, it's a policy and we don't have one. And the existence of the policy will be something that pushes people to change or to take it seriously. Plus, I really appreciated the funding that you found, that you brought up last week, to support high schools with whatever infrastructure they might need to comply with this policy. The thing I'm really stuck on is just like how hard it is to do as a teacher. And the like, I'll be super thrilled, the like exhaustion over the course of the year when it's not one student, but it is 9 students. You know, and it's not quickly checking a text, it's watching TV. And then I have to decide, am I calling my administrator for this when I'm trying to teach? Because there's also, I'm not in my classes right now, but 20 other students who aren't in that position. So I'm still not like, I still feel like it's not meeting the moment. And given that the moment continues to change, I think I could vote for it at the end of the year absent, or at the end of the month, absent the progressive disciplinary matrix.
Vice Chair Wood, the elimination of the progressive discipline matrix allow Memorial to continue operating the way that they are?
I think so. Do you?
Yeah.
it makes me wonder. I mean, essentially, the third occurrence is the first sight of a phone in a classroom there.
So, I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Well, actually, I'm sorry, the second.
Right.
So yours says second device confiscated. So I mean, there's still going to be practices that align with pieces of this.
Mm-hmm. Yep, so I'm curious to see what Board Member Muldrow and potentially Board Member Vandermeulen bring forth. You're saying schools are gonna do this anyway, whether it's in the policy or not?
I asked, like, cause, I mean, I've been Principal Hendrickson and Thompson. Tyson and Savion can tell you, cause I certainly occasionally talk with both of them in the hallways and things like that. So, you know, what I want to make sure that we're doing is anything that we do isn't a policy and it's distant between administration, staff, and students. It has to be something that does bring them together so there's understanding. And when I look at, I understand the language here, it's loaded with language, I get it. But I look at this as a chance to educate, I heard coach come up several times. You know, I really work with students. I've got a great relationship with family. You know, I'm gonna give Tyson's mom a call. We're gonna talk about this, why it's a problem.
Yeah, I know, I hear it. I'm just like thinking about my experience in the classroom. Students I have great relationships with, whose moms I have great relationships with. And still daily, the phone's out. And so like, I don't know that like having a stricter policy or a codified progressive matrix is the thing that's gonna make the difference for that. I don't pretend to know what's gonna make that difference. I'm curious about what storage, like having access to storage and having it be across all the high schools and across all the high school classrooms. I'm curious about how that might change things. I'm curious about how a culture that taps into student reward system or a culture that taps into like our shared need to manage our device addictions will go. But I don't want to take up too much more time.
Okay.
I'm hoping that we can meet the moment, and the policy by itself doesn't do that. But what policy, I suppose, could?
Or is the alternative to ban them from the school altogether?
I'm super curious about what lunch only would look like. I know that there are large schools that do this. I'm curious about how that would look. We don't have the principals anymore, but how that would look to use like a homeroom. So you still have an adult who says, okay, it's 8:15. Did you get your breakfast? All right, pop them in, come back before lunch. I know that wouldn't work at all schools. Think about West, where teachers are not in the same classroom. And I see Dr. Stanford shaking her head like, no, it's not possible. But I'm curious about what that would look like. I'm curious about what like hallway storage would look like. But again, I think I'm just going around in circles. Absent the progressive disciplinary matrix, I could vote for it. And I would hope to return to it within a year. Did you?
I just have a wondering, so absent of the progressive disciplinary matrix, if this is taken out, then how do we ensure that there is consistency around how situations are being handled with cell phones?
Because you're concerned, like Dr. Gothard, that I see a cell phone, you got it, and all of a sudden we're in a huge power struggle and you're like.
Or that it's handled, there's not this floor, as Dr. McCrae talked about earlier, for schools to have to, as kind of like their guidance and their guardrails. And if this is, it's just my wondering, if this is not there, then are we saying then that schools will determine then what this looks like, and it can be different across schools? Like one school could say, first occurrence, we're going right to the BEP. Second school can say you get 5 chances to go to the beat. So I'm just wondering what do you want?
Sure. So like I said, I'm curious what my colleagues would come up with as a different one. But I also understand that there's like lots of examples where guidance from the district comes not.
I want to put
policy.
order in relationship to that.
What was that?
I want a point of order in relationship to what Dr. Stanford just said, but I want to hear what you're saying.
it's my understanding there's lots of examples of places where, the district administration offers guidance to schools that isn't embedded in policy. This is my understanding, so I would think that you would be free to do that anyhow.
So my point of order would be just that the idea that our progressive discipline matrix produces consistency across classrooms and across students groups would be contrary to what the data that I am aware of in relationship to our school district. So what I saw when I was working security is like a kid would get security called on them for laughing. And obviously not consistently, like not all kids got in trouble for laughing, right? Or one day I went into a classroom and a kid got in trouble for eating in the classroom. And then the next day I came back to get that same kid who was in trouble for interrupting. And I noticed a different student eating. And when I asked the teacher why that student was saying and the other student had been asked to leave for eating, the teacher said one student was eating louder than the other student. So I don't think that the progressive discipline matrix eliminates the preferential treatment or like the non-preferential treatment of specific groups of students. And I think I'd have to have some kind of data or evidence in relationship to our use of progressive discipline over the years that would suggest we're evenly distributing it across student groups and each teacher is holding students to the same standards based in it.
Okay, I'm gonna go to Claire and then come back to, oh, I'm sorry, were you done?
I'm done, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair.
I'm sorry. Student Representative Lee, and then we'll come back to Board Member Sarabo.
Thank you. So I probably won't be here to vote since I guess this probably will be my last meeting until Lily takes over. But I got a lot of student perspective that I just wanted to share about this entire just like all the discussion around cell phones in schools. And I wanted to bring that to the board's attention. And I know Lily will continue to honor everything that the students have been saying. Um, I got a lot of input from Student Senate and the kids in Student Senate about what they think of this cell phone ban. Personally, I would say that I do see cell phones as an issue in classrooms where students are getting distracted by their cell phones. But we also do live in an age where cell phones aren't going to go away anytime soon. Technology isn't going to go away anytime soon. And I see a teacher will take away a cell phone. I've seen two things that have happened to me before that I want to point out. One of them is I see students turn to their laptops, even their Chromebooks, and they find unblocked websites to play games on. So if they're not paying attention, they're still going to find a different way of technology to not pay attention with. And the other situation that I saw in my middle school was a teacher took away a phone, and this kid pulled out another cell phone. And then the teacher took away that cell phone, and then they pulled out another cell phone. So it's just, I think if high school is to prepare, I'm speaking specifically in high schools right now, if high school is to prepare students for post-secondary pathways, I think that we need to teach students how to use their cell phones responsibly because cell phones aren't going to go away and students need to learn how to use their cell phones responsibly. I don't necessarily have like a specific proposal for how we could do this, but it's just something I wanted to bring attention to. And the other thing that I wanted to highlight that a lot of students were saying with the potential of an entire day phone ban for high schools is, first of all, off-campus lunch. I think that's a big thing that a lot of students have been saying. But another thing is that a lot of students go to MATC or UW-Madison for classes. If phones were to be taken, like let's say first hour, but they had a class third hour, where like finding their phone and then getting it and then getting to the bus and then getting to these locations where they need to go for their school. It's just logistically seems a little bit complicated. I guess also a lot of things like GroupMe's and Sports U, that's all on the cell phones. So like going to sports after school, or even sports that leave early for school. Also, just like the logistics of figuring out how to grab their phones, like halfway through fifth hour one day, but then halfway through sixth hour the other day. And the last thing I think a lot of students were also talking about is some students have early start or sorry, late start and early release, and some people have late start like through first hour or second hour. Like all of these things in high school, since we have such a different format than the middle schools and elementary schools, I think those are all just things that should be put into consideration for how we move forward with a phone ban and how students can access their phones responsibly and learn in like the post-secondary pathways how to use their phones responsibly. So I just wanted to bring attention to a lot of things that students have been saying, or I guess high school students, all across all the high schools. I think I've talked to all four comprehensive high schools for students, and that was their main concerns. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you so much. All right, board member Sarabo.
Chair Nichols. Yeah. I'm not in favor of the disciplinary matrix, the way that it is in there right now either. But I also wanted to point out what board member Muldrow had said about students who are parents. I don't know where that's captured in here right now. Stand.
It's not anywhere that's called out.
Because everything is talking about educational use and stuff like that, so I'm not exactly sure how the intentionalities.
Can I comment? I actually think the conversation you two are going to have would cover this group of students. Oh, you're done?
We're done. Martha and I have already about the ADA.
Okay.
There also is the teacher author. So maybe.
I know, but that's very specific to educational use, that's why I wasn't really sure if it's in there, and ADA is very specific to. Like, the reasons I need to get a hold of my daughter might be for something that more fits under ADA, but that's just because of like something in there, but also it doesn't, because it's just being able to get a hold of you as a parent. So I'm not really sure where it's captured yet, but I just really wanted to highlight that and recognize that that is a unique situation. I don't know if it's currently captured in the policy. I don't, the piece of the matrix that I really am uncomfortable is how like the parent is only brought in as like a disciplinary method. Is I think like the thing is try to get parent buy-in and to have parents understand the expectations that are at school, and right here it only just pops them in as a disciplinary thing in the third occurrence there. And it sounded to me as that both of the principals were saying like they get parents involved really early on when it's happening. And also usually the phone is brought from home, so there has to be some sort of crossover there, like a shared understanding, while also recognizing that everyone's housing situation is unique. And for that to have a shared understanding between the school staff and the parents, I see it really valuable in addressing the reliability and the need to access and to communicate during the day for different reasons. I like how student rep Claire was talking about what's my train of thought? The relationship that a student has with their own device, and what does that look like over time, and how are they navigating that throughout the day? But that also goes to my question first. I was saying, what does the word off mean? Because like sometimes we say turn your phone off. Does that mean power it all the way down? Because then I was thinking about when board member Mulder was saying, well, if someone's making a phone call, pulling the phone out and using it, well, that means the phone screen was off. Because it takes a little bit of time to power something on, or like powered down, almost even more intentional as far as what is off. Because there's always stuff going through. And then I'm just also wondering, like, what is our, in some of the other policies that we've had like procedure in here as well. And one of the bigger things that I thing kind of draws a parent to, why do I need to get a hold of my students? Safety reasons sometimes, or like during a safety situation, what does that look like? And what is happening that makes me confident that I don't need to worry about my student having access or to be in communication with somebody. So I'm not really sure where that's clear to parents, and where is our PD, where is our expectation of that? How are we communicating that to the families? I don't know, that's a lot of thought. I don't know if it's really like a response to that, but that's kind of where that's where I'm going with that right now. I have seen a lot of stuff online, like Matt was saying that he did like a parent. I wonder what kind of data that they have actually. We had 2 high schools here today. We didn't, and not hearing from the other ones. I know Shabazz does during one of their celebrations of learning, I actually got to hear from the students what they did without a day when they didn't have them. So I know it's impactful. I've seen social media posts from La Follette. Did you need something?
Well, I just want to ask, so are the things that you're bringing up right now, are they specific to like either policy language or things that you would want to see in here?
That's what I'm wondering, because I don't know what we currently have implemented. So in different policies, we've had policy, but then there's also been the procedure
Yeah,
that is instilled as well. Would having the procedure of what happens during an emergency situation as far as communication that staff is doing be something that was of substance or impactful to parents, as far as like, why is my student going to school with a cell phone? Is it for communication reasons? Is it for safety reasons? Because I don't know how I would get a hold of my student during that, during a safety issue.
yeah, I mean, what I think I heard Dr. McCray say earlier this evening, when you brought up the safety drills and just safety period, right? Because I think that is a legitimate concern of parents, like in the event of an emergency, like
Yeah.
if my kiddo's cell phone is not powered on or accessible, how do I get in touch with them?
Right.
I thought I heard Dr. McCray say that the Office of School and Safety would now need to go back through their language and update references to whatever the approved final policy is.
And that for me, would be
Right.
in our district safety plan that we do.
Oh, okay, so it would end up in the district safety plan and maybe not in this policy right now.
Yeah, that's what we're wondering. What is the alignment with that? Would it be impactful? How would parents ingest that? Would it affect phones coming into the buildings in the first place to some degree?
It might, I
You
mean,
know.
I feel like what I heard Principal Hendrickson say tonight,
Yeah.
right, is like at the beginning, month or so of school,
Yeah.
lot more calls, because you're still building the culture.
Yeah.
That like, we don't have phones during class time. And then as students have become more accustomed to it, right, they're like, oh, they really did take my phone. Like, oh, okay. Maybe there's fewer calls because students are going along with it. There could be cases where maybe they're getting fewer calls, because what I also heard say is maybe teachers are still having incidents, but they're tired. We don't know exactly, but that to me, I wonder, Board Member Sarabo, is like, is that more of like a data question once we do go into implementation? Because to me, it's like, it's good to, until we can say to either our superintendent and the team, we would like some data to be collected and to come back. It's kind of like one school may have it right now, another school doesn't. It's hard to know what we're seeing around a consistent approach.
I think it's just been clear when I'm thinking of a safety drill. And we just kind of went over some of the basics of an adult having their device on them, which is one of the things I brought up, like what's our expectation for that? And saying that sometimes the line, during a situation, like maybe that would not be the best way, but then during safety drill, are they automatically going to the spot if they're in a room are they going to the place where the landline phone is? Or are they just going to a place that's out of sight,
When you say safety drill, so
like a lockdown?
like a practice,
Yeah. In practice.
yeah, I mean, a lockdown could be so many different, situations depending on where students are. They might be with their teacher of record,
Yeah.
it could be a passing time, it could be lunch. So there are protocols for our staff to work with students in those kinds of situations. And I don't think the expectation ever would be that there's a way for any community member to reach out to an individual in that building in the event of an actual drill.
So my question though is, if a teacher has a device on their person, what are they doing with their phones during that time?
The teacher?
Yeah. They're an adult with a phone possibly on their person. I'm just saying, like, if it's a lockdown, are they expected to make it go silent?
It should already be.
Oh, I see. I see
It's like are you asking about the staff?
Is that our procedure? Yeah.
Yep.
But I don't,
I mean, we can clarify.
I hear you, but I don't.
Stay as quiet as possible, so that would.
Okay.
But I can clarify.
Cause I'm wondering, do we do, like, that's
Such a
good
control issue to me.
So that's why I'm asking. And that's like proactive then, in that.
We also don't govern our staff members' phone. Like, that's the other piece about it too, like, we don't.
I know it's not governor, but that's just maintaining safety during that moment. And I'm thinking about what is expected of adults during that moment.
So let me just say that I think that there are expectations for adults when we are in here for lockdown that we ask all of our adults. We have our standard response protocol that we all share, all use about what adults should already be doing in these processes.
Yeah.
That is very common. I mean, that's one of the year, but we like all of our build, like we have just a standard response.
Yep.
Okay, can I ask? I think given the fact that we have to vote on a policy by the end of the month, is, I guess what I'm trying to get clear on right now is the safety language or referencing what happens during safety drills and or incidents. Are you saying that that's something that you want referenced in this policy in some way or not? Because I just want to, we've got 2 more board members and I want to make sure that
And
we're
what-
getting clear on what needs to change in this policy to keep it moving.
Saying I want to explore, would that add value to that? And also from a parent perspective, do we know what the expectations are? Like, is it part of, because some policies do a procedure intentionally put in there so that it's just clear across the board what we are doing.
Okay,
Yep.
And
so
so
Dr. Ray, what would your answer be?
know that we do not need to be that. There are a couple of things that's been stated here. Number one, we cannot capture every exception that board members are bringing in this one policy. Trying to attempt to do that, we're just gonna be opening the door to think about what other group that we did not miss. Like, we're thinking about like parents and this group and this group. It's just no way to capture for all the different ways and the different students that we support throughout our district. It's just very hard. I also don't think that having or addressing like what board member Sarabo is bringing right now is applicable for this current policy. I just would reiterate again, we have a public facing document with all of our safety procedures that is on our website that really talks about what every individuals are doing. And that is where that information is already housed.
So,
Point of order, I'm just kind of confused of where we're at, Chair. I'm just confused if we're all speaking. Sorry, I didn't know and I was just confused.
I'm sorry, right now, we're trying to get through questions. And
Okay.
where there are responses, I'm allowing for the responses. So.
Okay, my sound went out partway through, so I didn't hear the last sentence.
Okay. Can I move? Are you good, Board Member Saravo, in terms of any policy language or things that you wanted to surface?
Yeah, because like I said, I want I want that part. I don't like it how it stands right now is what I'll end with.
What part?
The progressive disciplinary matrix as it stands.
Okay. Got it. All right, I'm gonna go to board member Pearson and then President Castro.
Okay, thank you. So I think I mentioned this before, but I'll just mention it again. When talking to some school districts across the US, their feedback, and this is for board members at our level, their feedback was with their policies, to think about it being less about restriction and more about the questions of how systems are designed to support. Some of the feedback that they gave was we focus on clear non-negotiable baselines, that we focus on, this is just like from their thoughts, the shared responsibilities for enforcement that extends beyond teachers, and ongoing feedback loops to identify what is working and what is actually needed to update the policies and or whatever other supports that are needed. And so when I think about that, and I think about the feedback loop, so I'm okay with voting on this as at the end of the month. I also would be interested to look outside of the progressive discipline matrix. Right now, I think to have it there is I'm okay with, as long as we're readdressing it at some point. If once some new language comes around, like, you know, more of a less punitive approach to it. But I think part of the question for me is around how do we build in then data feedback loops? And so what does that actually look like? Because if we're going to be updating this policy, I'm also thinking about down the line, if the legislature is looking to do whatever, that we also are able to adequately advocate for or against if we need to, that we have some data baselines. What we hear is that we are tracking some of this, but it's not really clear as to what is needed to be tracked, what, you know, what is actually happening in terms of who is actually being impacted. I can give, as a parent, I can give, you know, two different perspectives, one at Memorial, one at West, but I'll save that for another time. But if I call West High School right now, and say, well, not at this moment, but I've done this where I've called West High School for my kid to come out for a doctor's appointment, it's very difficult to get through the different levels to just get my kid out, which it's easier just to text my kid, hey, come out for your appointment. I call the attendance line, leave a message, and boom, like it's updated, or I go into Infinite Campus. To Claire's point, you know, Sports U is on there. I'm in all the things, not just for sports, for Science Olympiad, for robotics, and all these other kind of clubs that our students use as well. And my student is one of those students who leave pretty early in the day for whatever activities. And so to me, it's also a question about how do we create just wireless communication hygiene across the board for parents. I restrict my kids on their phones. I have can cut off all the things and they can only use it to call me during the day. So how are we educating parents? How are we educating students to actively use it? So that's just like what my question is. And I don't necessarily know if we figure out a way to have that feedback loop too, of like, how can we just also implement it in a way that then supports the growth and development of our young people. I also read the book, also listened to many podcasts with the author. And I think one of the questions is that when that child turns 18 and they go off into the world, what does that look like for them to be able to adequately do that? And I really appreciate student representatives like comments around that, because I think we do live in a very tech heavy, and that's not going away. But how do we prepare our young people for that next step in the future, to be able to have the critical thinking skills, to be able to have the hygiene, how to kind of navigate. So I would be interested in what implementation looks like how we do this, whether it is later that it's a complete ban, who is being impacted, because I do think that's really important for us and for me. And where parents kind of like live within this policy, and how we're kind of like working with building staff, parents, and our kiddos to make sure that that they're well in this. I think we focus a lot on for our conversations around the cell phones. And as we heard tonight, smartwatches is the next thing that we haven't really necessarily looked at. So I just want to make sure that even the public, that they understand, like, this isn't just about cell phones, it's about all wireless communication devices. And you know, people are addicted to all types of things. But we're talking about the full scale of this. I also just want to make the comment that we are not dragging our feet. I think it is important to be very thoughtful, and I appreciate my colleagues on this board, including the administration and the folks that have put a lot of work into this, to be very thoughtful, very cognizant of who's impacted, how, whether it's teachers, students, our community is impacted in this, because, you know, once we vote on this, this becomes the law for the district. And I think we just have to be very thoughtful and take our time in whatever we decide. I know that we are time crunched. And so right now I'm okay with the matrix being in here, with the understanding that we will bring it back at some point. And my expectation is that we have actual data that backs up whatever we decide that we want to do moving forward. I will be looking for that later. And so that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, President Castro.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that there are some elements of the conversation we're all having socially writ large that are just emblematic of the engineered dependency we have to these devices, that we can't imagine our lives without them, no less for 3 hours during the day at a time. I'm on record that I think that big tech, big social media is part of big tobacco, or the new big tobacco. I think that it's worth trying to be ambitious with our policy and practice on this, that many things are challenging, many things seem logistically difficult. That doesn't mean we don't try to do them. I'd be interested in how we implement and how we start to think about device usage, social media hygiene, cell phone hygiene, or device hygiene in our SEL curriculum and practices. I think that there are many elements in human life where we learn how to do something or learn how to engage something without it being physically in front of us. So I'm not sure if, we need something in front of us to learn how to use it, much less that, this is a multi-trillion-dollar industry. If you buy the device, trust me, they will make sure you know how to use it. So I am interested in how we develop those good hygiene practices. The only other comment I have on the actual policy as written is I would be interested in how we engage with the discipline matrix. And I'd be interested in, as it's written right now, that I'd be interested in a written policy ceiling, in that if schools want to, they can strive for bell to bell, but they can right now have it as written. But if they want to try it, they can go bell to bell. So I'd be interested in some language with that. I think the locked pouches is the most pragmatic way to do that. So yeah, that's my comment.
All right, yes, I see board member.
I didn't know if you saw my hand. I apologize.
Yep, go for it.
I want to start out by saying that what my issues are with the policy, the discipline matrix, one. Two, my colleague Ali Muldrow brought up an excellent point on parents of children that I hadn't thought of, and Martha and my colleague board member Shravo also thought of, and we did address parents. So I'd like to see something in there. I'd also like to see something in there on safety. As for the tech argument, I understand the fear in that, and it's late, I get it, but I'm going to make you go back to 1984. 1984 was the year I started first grade. It was also the year that we forced, via lawsuit, the first computer into Whitewater Lincoln Elementary School because I couldn't write my name, and otherwise I wouldn't have been allowed to attend or be able to do any of the work. And the first things that parents stated was that children would forget how to write, that it was unnecessary, that it was unneeded. There needs to be restrictions on everything and every behavior, but you can't prejudge something and by just banning it. The hygiene is the important, it's how you use it. Yes, there are parts of social media I can't stand. The exploitation, absolutely. But I don't want to destroy the technology just to stop what I don't like. I want to learn how to protect what we do. So those are my comments. Thank you.
All right, Dr. McCray. I think as I was tracking the conversation, it seems like the progressive discipline matrix is the thing mentioned the most by board members.
Already emailed Ali to set up time to discuss.
Okay, I know there are some references also to family communication. Clear language, maybe, even if it was just a sentence relative to like the safety, how safety will be dealt with. I don't know if that's the right language. I don't know. I know you said not to include safety plan in this, right? So we don't want to necessarily like duplicate the work, but maybe finding a way to more clearly communicate. So that if students, staff, or families are reading the policy, they have a better idea of like how safety will be dealt with. I know you all have put a lot of work into this. And I guess what I'm wondering about is, since we only have one additional work group and then the board meeting, and there's still a lot of suggesting tonight, when would we see it again? At the regular board meeting?
Can't do it at this point, for me, unless the board is having a special meeting or something in between.
So one of the things I was just summarizing, board member Muldrow, was that because there's still a lot of suggestions tonight, I don't know when we would see another version before it comes to the June board meeting. Or is that the meeting that we're gonna see the next and fourth version of the policy? Cause we only have operations work group, and then so unless we call a special meeting, we won't have an opportunity to engage again with a next iteration. So board member Muldrow?
Yeah, I imagine every time we have these kinds of conversations that the point of the conversation is to synthesize the feedback from the board and then use that feedback to update the policy appropriately in alignment with the board's opinions. So I guess my question for our administration is, if you were going to adjust the policy based on the feedback you heard tonight, how would you adjust it?
I mean, based upon what we said is how we're adjusting. I think what she's, or member Nichols is just asking is, once we've updated, how then are we going to have another opportunity for the board to review that update? Or is it just at the June meeting So
Yeah, I mean, it was more just a question that I was putting out there, because I think I think the original thinking was that this was the third reading tonight. And that we may not still be suggesting as many changes, but we still are. I'm not saying as many changes like in a bad way, I'm just saying.
I
we're
think what
not
I
there
find
yet.
complicated about that is what I've suggested change about this, I've suggested since the first time we talked about it. So it's not like the things I'm saying are the reasons I can't vote for it are new. And what I'm understanding from our administration, those concerns have been looked into and like we're open to working together. So my presumption is that it would come to us in June at our regular board meeting and it would have the responses that we heard tonight incorporated into it. And that because that would be a reflection of the conversation we had, we should kind of be prepared to vote for that version. But I could be wrong. And I guess I'm wondering, are you saying if we're gonna have a new version drafted, we wanna workshop it and have more time with it?
Well, I'm not suggesting that. What I'm saying is what I heard tonight is that several board members saying, I'm not comfortable voting on progressive discipline matrix. I've heard one suggestion of here's an alternative, but we don't know what the actual alternative actually looks like in terms of policy. That's all. So all I'm saying is if we don't have another work group to look at what that alternative is, I mean, there are enough board members that said, hey, I'd like you to relook at this progressive discipline matrix. We just don't know what the alternative is right now. So we can either do that at the June board meeting, or maybe there's some other special meeting over the next couple of weeks. I'm not sure, but I guess I just wanted to, I'm trying to get clear on what the next steps are for this.
So I just want to reiterate from where I sit, I work with Boardman Muldrow. So talk about the progressive, that will be done. But the how right now is for me is at the board meeting, unless the board decides that they want to have a different conversation before then.
Okay.
And if that's what the board decides, then we'll be prepared for that, whatever that day should be. But for right now, in my mind, it's at the end of the month of June. Because there is no other meeting that's scheduled currently for that conversation to happen. Now, it doesn't mean that it can't be, but I'm just saying from where I sit, that's.
Okay. President Castro, are you tracking that?
Yep.
Okay, great. Because once I'm done with the work group, you know what I mean? I don't necessarily call like a special meeting, right? That goes back to our president, so. Okay, well, I appreciate Board Member Muldrow, you working with Dr. McCray on the alternative. And I want to thank everybody for your engagement on this. Board Member Saravo?
I have a quick question. Board Member Muldrow, if you're working on it with him, are you taking all the, are you like ingesting everything that was talked about here today? What does that look like?
From my perspective?
Yeah.
So I would try to synthesize as much of the conversation we had tonight and apply it to the policy, and I think that's what our administration would do in relationship to feedback regularly. I think the things that are not specific to what I'm concerned about, but that I fully support and heard from board members, like the pouches being an option and having further exploration around that. I think it's also relevant to like take into consideration feedback we've heard from the community this evening and from educators tonight. And so I would try to represent that to the best of my ability, and I am happy to be in contact with all of the board members in terms of how you'd like me to do that moving forward.
All right, was your hand back up?
Yeah,
Okay.
I did just have a quick question. What is possibly on the slate for June? Because our budget, it's the budget conversation. I'm thinking of like, if we're gonna,
UG?
no, for if we are thinking about bringing this back into our regular board meeting
That, I'm gonna,
on like in June. Like I'm thinking about logistics. So if we're gonna have another conversation like this around certain pieces possibly, because we tend to do that. If that's the case, do we want to have another meetings? Or how do we decide that? Because, or are we prepared to have that conversation fully at the regular board? And so I'm trying to solicit like how much possibly maybe on this regular board meeting.
I'm fine discussing it on the floor.
I'm gonna defer back to President Castro and then see where, board member Muldrow and Dr. Ray get
Okay.
in the process.
I'm sorry, do you mind if I ask a question?
Yeah.
Sure.
Are you asking if this would be added to next week's meeting agenda?
No, I'm asking like,
If we're not bringing it back.
if we're
next
not
week,
bringing it next
else
week.
might
Okay.
bring it back.
And we typically, when we have conversations, even if it's something minor, like a change, well, this wouldn't be minor, this would be a whole matrix possibly.
Mhm.
That conversation may take an hour or whatever. And so what I'm saying is if our regular board meeting is also stacked, we're not having operations work group, then in my opinion, it would be best for us to then schedule a special meeting, even if it's only for an hour or so, so that we can dive into it, so that we will be prepared to vote in June, and that we don't have to have an hour conversation at the regular board meeting with public comment, with the budget, with other things that we have to have conversations around. And so I'm trying to like think about it logistically for us.
Right.
Cause I would prefer not to bring it at I don't wanna like have.
I see what you're saying, because you're like, I'd like to be comfortable with the policy that's being presented to us.
Absolutely.
When we're supposed to vote for it.
Right.
And I think
That's all I was trying to say.
that there's
Where's this
like,
happen?
there are a variety of variables from my perspective that influence
Mhm.
that. So like, me and Dr. McCray could sit down, we could do our absolute best, and we could be like, yo, like, it's actually really not gonna work to change, like, we can
Right.
really be like grasping at straws here. We got nothing and we got a little bit of time and we're mandated to do this. The other thing that I think is relevant to it is like how much time it actually takes for us to get together, for us to get your feedback, for us to get a new draft, for that to be in front of people. And I think that maybe what we might want to say is, if we know it needs to be a larger conversation,
Yeah.
then like, what are our signals to know that?
Yeah.
And how fast can we know that? And I think that's might be something we need to work out in follow-up to this conversation. I don't know if we can actually land there, given the variables and unknowns. So I'm hoping we can continue the kind of
Real
logistical
quick,
work offline.
it sounds like some individual board members will have meetings with staff. I will monitor those meetings, and if we need a special meeting, I will schedule it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's why I turned it back to.
No, that's good. Thank you, President Castro. And my only comment to that is I would rather us schedule it sooner than later, just to have it on the books for people's schedule, just to schedule something. And if we don't need it, then we don't need it. But that's just my 2 cents on that. So yeah, thanks.
All right. Thank you all. Jesse, I would like us to take a 5-minute recess. I need to go to the restroom. That's okay. Tyson, sorry, but
just so you could put that deck up for me too.
All right, at this point, we are gonna now move into our next topic, which is an update from Family, Youth, and Community Engagement. And just to set the stage for board members, this is more of an introduction, getting a new look at our director, better understanding how the department is set up, and for any of you that also had shared questions with me, I did share those with Tyson in advance, so hopefully you'll hear some of that, or he's at least willing to answer some of those questions.
Absolutely.
All right, am I turning it over to Dr. McRae?
Yeah.
Okay.
So first and foremost, super excited. Here this evening. I'm really excited about this opportunity where we can hear about our family engagement. As you are aware, this is our first full year where we have actually brought back this department together, where as an actual FICE office. I am super excited if people will ask me, like, if you left Madison and had a legacy, what would it be? For me, it has definitely been hiring Ty's son, and the story is my son name is Ty, so sometimes I have to remind myself because I'll call him that too. But seeing Tyson do this work over this year has been a joy. The way in which he's just been approaching the work. So I'm super excited to turn it over to him this afternoon, where he will be kind of doing high level introduction of the FICE department, those who have worked with him, and just how they're supporting students, families, along with community engagement. Okay.
So to be concise, I'm gonna go off my notes for the next about 12 to 15 or so minutes. So thank you, Chair Nichols and members of the board for the opportunity to share about our Office of Family, Youth, and Community Engagement tonight. My name is Tyson Jackson, and I proudly serve as our director under the direction of Dr. TJ McRae. To ground us in tonight's purpose, you will learn more about the importance of our central office collaboration in our work. You will learn how we are transforming our work to better support our schools. You will hear about how we are looking to be intentional with student support, and also how we are working to elevate our voices and connections. Introducing you to our central office team, I want to start with a little background information on who I am. I was born and raised in the Madison community. I grew up in a single parent home on Section 8 that presented adverse situation. I attended 6 different MMSD schools throughout elementary and my secondary experience, 2 schools at each level. The community and the district raised me and mean a great deal to me. My oldest daughter even recently graduated from UW-Madison just a few weeks ago on full scholarship after a decorated MMSD experience. I know that MMSD works. Throughout my professional career, there is one consistent theme. Going all the way back to my time at the local East YMCA as a teenager, I've always worked for the community. I've worked in school settings at Sun Prairie High School in a role similar to our SCS. Also in nonprofits with Commonwealth Development, partnering with MMSD schools for youth employment, mentorship, and internship opportunities.
Nice.
Then to UW Health, building equitable employment and health career exploration programs in partnership with local, such as Central, Boys and Girls Club, and Urban League. Most recently, I spent 6 years at UW-Madison at the Collaborative Center for Health Equity at the School of Medicine and Public Health. Community partnerships have always been a critical part to my work. Like many, I have endured struggle and hurt in the community, but I have also found healing and prosperity in the community. Part of that healing lived in my school community and the people and the opportunities. I find immense value in this role, as community engagement is not a perfect science yet. The excitement that I have comes from the ability to be thoughtful, creative, and lead with intentionality. I lead with empathy, transparency, and collaboration. I lead with the lens of community and understanding our potential role in supporting student and family success holistically. A fun fact about me is that I've known Dr. Gothard since 2000. He was a biology teacher and I was a freshman at La Follette High School. I never realized the impact that he would have on my life as a teenager. With no positive male influence in my life at the time, he struggled with me, held me accountable, and altered my course of life, even through becoming a parent as a junior in high school. Proof that it takes just one person to care, one adult, one coach, as he was my varsity football coach, but he ended up being so much more. I come into this work holding on to that connection to help usher the vision forward. Please take a moment to look at the FICE vision statement on the screen. You can also see our key pillars. Our hope is that when FICE and MMSD are successful, we will see a clear engagement vision, expectation, and infrastructure for MMSD, an engaged community with equitable supports for students and families, clear and concise pathways for engagement and exploration, lifted family voices, families being valued as partners and co-designers, intentional partnership alignment. And through all this, these will hopefully lend to improved outcomes in areas of belonging, attendance, and learning. In my first year, as you can look at our org chart on the screen, we adjusted our department to mirror that of MMSD with a feeder pattern supported structure, as you can see in the org chart. We have a school team, that will be our MSCs, our multicultural service coordinators, and our SES, or our student engagement specialists. Then we have central office support for those teams by our FICE coordinators. And then we have a direct channel to district decision makers as I report directly to Dr. McCray. The role of the MSC is to look to advance student and family engagement that align with goals for student success, thriving environments, and student excellence. They aim to cultivate a sense of belonging for all through positive and supportive relationships and support student leadership and post-secondary exploration. The role of the SES is to serve as the vital link between school goals and family needs. They facilitate our newly implemented family intake processes and student goal setting sessions to ensure academic success. They aim to support attendance, transition years, and students engaging extracurricular opportunities. They truly elevate student belonging and school culture. For the first time this summer, we will lean into a community site partnership to maintain out-of-school time connections with families, with 7 total sites. The SES is a pivotal role and was a Board of Education investment just a couple of years ago. Why collaboration is important to FICE, and this is in terms of our central office integration. We are a small department and we are leaning into leadership. Family, youth, and community engagement, we believe, is a district-wide responsibility. We are moving from siloed reactive outreach to systematic and proactive partnerships, and we are aligning equity and intentionality. Examples of some of our key partnerships that we focused on in year 1 are college and career and community readiness, or CCCR, student and staff support, strategic partnerships, communications, and our family ombudsperson. How we're supporting school capacity. This year, we focused on defining our school-based roles and expectations at school sites. We are at 10 middle schools and 5 high schools. That's including capital. As we looked to identify gaps in our work and school administration goals. We focused on building our transition support strategy. We piloted a Spartan 101 at Memorial just a month ago. We set a framework for utilizing our school-based budgets, allocations, and identified practices and scope for effective resource utilization and school collaboration. We worked closely with strategic partnerships to identify district partners that fit within our departmental pillars and place them with intentionality. Examples of direct support for students are that we have added guiding practices to our one-on-one support for students and families. We are increasing attendance efforts and setting goal-driven expectations. We also are setting a calendar of events for each school that we serve. They include collaborative events, transition events, cultural events, post-secondary events, and intentional community-based events and field trips. I would also like to highlight our Latino Empowerment Conference as an example. And this would be in our school-based approach there. This year, we transitioned from an HSI college tour as we adjusted to our current social climate. We worked collaboratively with each high school's Latino Student Union advisor, most notably with La Follette High School, whose Latino student unions provided voice and leadership to planning, breakout session development, and emceed the event. We brought in representation across the Latino culture diaspora to bring perspective and a sense of belonging. We partnered with Edgewood College to host the event and provide a college experience. The event saw cultural performances, student leadership, district collaboration, and real world perspectives, all done in Spanish. We had a college internship fair, or a college and internship fair, where we had one student secure a summer internship on the spot. We served about 120 students this day and saw support from dozens of MMSD and local leadership through presence and logistical support. Through this day of empowerment, we also offered a fresh way of collaboration between students, staff, and district. Here you'll see some of the things that we're doing to build connections with family. At Fights Forward, we partnered with the Madison Forward soccer team and allowed parents and families to come in, enjoy the game, have food, and learn more about our Family Advisory Council and our Family University. We have an ambitious goal also of utilizing partners such as Rubens for Kids and MSCR to connect each student on our SES caseload. That could be up to 240 students per year to at least one out-of-school time program. Utilizing these supports, we believe that we can do this free of charge. We have and are continuing to build connection points through various platforms and families to provide their voice within our work. What we're doing to connect with families. In the beginning of the presentation, I talked about creativity and the opportunities to learn and build in this work. As a part of our overall strategic framework for the district, we have two large undertakings, as you can see on the slide. You may have heard of parent universities. You also may have heard of district level parent advisory councils. We are committing to both and using the term family. We are utilizing our Family Advisory Council to drive the launch of our Family University tracks next year. By doing so, we are creating a multi-pronged system for family engagement. We see families as co-creators and advocates and hope to develop our council membership into school level ambassadors and drivers of school-based Family University track development for their schools in the future. As true engagement doesn't live at the district, but instead it lives in our schools. Access. At every engagement, we are securing child watch, food, and translation services, ensuring that total families are welcomed and know that. These Family University experiences will include things like trips to the MMSD Planetarium, the school forest, maybe a local college. It will have parent and student experience. It'll have social experiences as well as educational experiences. We will rotate locations between schools and community sites. We will learn and lean on local agencies and district departments as partners and experts in our offerings and programs. Moving forward, the things that we hope to accomplish early next year is the launch of our Family University. We hope to continue to build efficient and intentional infrastructure for schools in terms of family engagement. We hope to expand MMSD through intentional school to community collaboration. I mentioned earlier summer site work that we have upcoming here this year, and eventually collaboration with our Freedom Schools. And as far as reshaping partnerships, our goal will always be to continue to strengthen the most critical partnership, and that is the partnership between family, youth, and community engagement and our schools, and our schools, and our families. One partnership I'd like to highlight to close us is the newly developed partnership with Centro Hispano. They've developed a new leadership position, and our department is taking on a leadership role within that. And this is designed to align and support Latino family engagement and elevate collaborative efforts between MMSD and Centro. Questions?
Okay. Thank you. Well, all right, you heard this update. We'll go with questions, and if you don't feel like you have questions, y'all, you could also just send some warm feedback. Anything you appreciated. The Tyson. All right, we'll start with board member Muldrow.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. It feels like nice to get to have this conversation with you on the first day of Pride, at a time when our community is like celebrating that everybody kind of belongs, and particularly that our schools are welcoming to all educators and families and young people. I'm curious about what feedback in relationship to your work has been this year, both from kind of the folks who are directly supervising the work for you in partnership with you, and from community and family and the folks you have outreach to. And what is your mechanism for consistently getting feedback?
Yeah, so that's a great, and if I can, oh, it's not up anymore, but
Thanks, Jesse.
there is a slide, it's slide 16. Let me go back. Okay, thank you, Jesse. Some intentional connection points that we've put into place. I mentioned our family intake process. So that is essentially a survey that we hope that our SESs have with caregivers, family members of students. So they'll do one with the student, and then they'll do one also with the caregiver. And that's a way for us to better understand how to support the student at that level. We've also implemented a family engagement survey that we hope to have at every single event that we have facing, especially when it's family facing. And within that survey, we actually took those results, and that survey will ask questions like, what's prevented you from engaging MMSD? Or what are some things that would interest you in terms of what can MMSD produce that would interest you in actually taking part? And we took that feedback and actually presented it to our Family Advisory Council. And that's how we developed some of the potential track options for the Family University. We're also looking to elevate a multicultural parent group, and this is across the high schools, specifically right now, with the long distance goal of being able to have our Family Advisory Council membership, which that membership is essentially 2 families, diverse in nature, looking at representation, of course, from each school. So 104 total families involved in this, and to have them act as ambassadors for their school to eventually be able to take things back that we are able to share and present with them at the district level, but then to also one day in the future be able to then take what we have as the resources for Family University and develop their own tracks for the families in their own schools. As we know, and as I mentioned, understanding that family engagement doesn't live up here with me. It lives in the schools with the teachers and the principals and the staff there.
That's tremendously exciting to hear. And sounds like an incredible amount of work. And I think when I say we have 52 schools and sites, I often think people don't realize we're including the Children's Hospital and the detention center and shelter, things like that. But it sounds like you are factoring those families into this plan really intentionally. And I want you to know I deeply appreciate it. My last question for you is, how can the board support this work, and how can the board leverage this work to inform our decisions? This question is not meant to be a directive in terms of anything board related. So I'm not asking you, hey, are you working on our technology and device policy, and talking to families about it. I am asking you more of like, what is the work that you want us to reference and think about when we're making decisions coming from your department?
Yeah, I do, and I'll first turn to TJ to talk about potential workbook changes in the future. Maybe not.
No, not now.
Okay. Well, one of the things that we are hoping for, to answer your question, is we are hoping to create. Right now, I feel like there is a lot on my school-based staff in terms of what we are trying to implement and to do it effectively. So that is one thing that I would say is an area of sort of, I don't want to say concern, it's not concern level, but I see it. And I'm always interested in having the capability to increase our ability to support schools effectively. Because I think that's one of the biggest challenges that I walked into when taking on this role is identifying and seeing the challenges that we have at the school level and ensuring that the implementation happens. Yeah, so I'll stop there.
I really appreciate your response, and I think what I'm hearing from that response is part of what you're looking to do is strengthen your relationships to the schools themselves. And so really looking to supporting this work as it opens kind of new channels of communication and kind of fully builds its infrastructure in terms of like getting you off the ground and going. I just want to thank you for bringing in your personal story this evening. I think it's really rare and it's always a risk and it's a vulnerable thing to say, hey, I'm going to talk from my experience and why this work matters to me. And I think it helps us be rooted in our own why and have greater connection to yours. And so I really appreciated your approach to sharing with us this evening. And I look forward to how this work will continue to solidify itself within our schools.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for me, Chair.
All right, I'm going to Vice President Mosner-Feltham next, and then Board Member Sarabo, and then Board Member Vandermeulen.
Thanks. Congratulations on coming to the end of the first school year.
Thank you.
That's big. That first year is so exciting. So I'm glad to hear about all that you're doing. I have one like real concrete question, which is for individual based direct student supports. How are students getting ID'd for that support?
Right now, that it's been school-based, so I did not make a change to how the caseloads, or we call them caseloads, that's changing also, by the way. That's been at the school level, generally, that students that have behavioral or attendance struggles, students that have been identified as being able to use additional supports in the school by the administration and student services.
And then your field teams are sort of sitting in those meetings saying, okay, well, I can work with this kid, but the social worker can work with that.
Yeah, it's different across the board. It has been for the first year. We have implemented, so that's changing next year. It's all already done. We have now set thresholds for students that can be on caseloads that match our school's attendance goals. So moving forward, what I can say is that the changes that have been made are that we feel that the support, because of how we're currently structured and that our SESs are half the time in middle schools and half the time in high schools, we're getting students with like 20% attendance, 30% attendance, and we have a staff member that's there half the time. The chances of us being able to have an authentic relationship and actually meet that student on a week-to-week basis like we hope to can cause some challenges. So one of the things that we've gone and adjusted for our caseload development for the schools, and all principals, we'll meet with all principals and staff to have this discussion with them before they go into it. But students that are on our SCS caseloads should have a minimum attendance of 70%. Each attendance threshold that we're at, so students under 70% or under 80%, I'm sorry. So between that 70 and 80%, the goal for that year with the student engagement specialist is to climb from 70 to 80%. And so looking at what we need to do to support that student and family to help make that adjustment. Same thing, and we'll have quarter of the caseload at that level. We'll have another quarter of the caseload at that 90 percentile, so between 90 and 93, with the effort or the hope of getting them to above into that 94, the green zone that we have. And then we'll have 50%, so the bulk of the caseload in that 80 to 90 percentile. And so then our goal is, of course, at each percentile to raise to that next level of attendance. So we'll have that, and that'll be our primary, and that'll focus our work on attendance support. And then in addition to that, we will take in to account, behavioral support and things like that. And then again, it'll still be on the schools to develop that caseload, except for we're now putting in parameters to allow for more effective work to be done from our school-based staff.
Appreciate the answer. Sounds great. My next question is about, I guess this is sort of like, as you think like in the next handful of years about your work, do you expect that when your team begins to build out like that framework for engagement standards or a comprehensive family experience model, that will be developed obviously collaboratively, but held with your team and then expanded so that everybody who works in a school will be saying, hey, we know from the FICE team that X, Y, and Z is what you need to say when you pick up the phone and not A, B, and C? Like, do you expect that like it will spread?
Sure, like school-based. Yep, I think so. So I just got back Friday from a conference, the Community Schools and Family Engagement Conference in Long Beach, and there I picked up a few nice items, and one of those is kind of what I've been thinking about pretty much this whole first year, and that is, how do I increase the capacity of family engagement at the school level, with the team so small, understanding that it needs to be done at the school level. And so with that comes principal buy-in. And then with that, then how do we support the principals in supporting their staff? So I do have thoughts around that, but one of the things that I will do, and that is provide sort of a baseline family engagement. These are what the schools should consider for all staff, because family engagement is from the reception desk, it's to the teachers, it's to the custodial service, it's everywhere. It's really just a culture shift. And so arming the principals with the tools and resources to shift the culture is my plan for that. And that'll come in the form of, documentation and hopefully some PDs and trainings to go along with that.
Well, those are my questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm so excited for the next update.
Absolutely, I appreciate it.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. All right, Board Member Saravo, Board Member Vandermeulen, you'll be after Martha.
Thanks for the presentation. I didn't catch the first part of it.
Couple of minutes.
Okay.
A couple.
Okay.
It's part of his story.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the last person that was kind of in this space, Mr. Adam Clausen, who I really appreciated him when he was here. And so I'm gonna that's kind of where my lens goes to when I'm thinking about kind of work and what we're doing here. I was wondering in the chart that you have, why are there certain schools that are in there and why are certain schools not within that chart of schools?
Sure. Great question. These are the exact same schools that were in there last year. So I didn't make any changes to that this year. It was sort of year zero, in essence, kind of seeing everything, evaluating, kind of taking it in, doing a lot of observation. So I don't have the answer to exactly why these schools were chosen, perhaps. Dr. McCray.
Some, and Dr. Stanford might help me out, but, so all of the high schools have representation by having those MSCs or they're already there supporting them. What you're noticing is that they're not in all of our middle schools. But when the SESs were, prioritized, they were made available to help support certain things in certain schools. Those schools who were ATSI or TSI, yeah, those schools, and so all of our middle schools were not. And so what has happened is we didn't make any changes based on those criterias. And so they've kind of remained those schools based upon their determination if they were ATSI or PSI. But now that's, I think, what we're talking about is how do we make that shift? Because what we're noticing is just some of the middle schools who don't have this level of support could still use that level of support. So finding ways to be able to support them, which is what he was trying to go into, is just something that we need to work behind the scenes.
I noticed though was Shabazz.
Right, because,
Yeah.
but it's a different
Oh, I
school,
know.
and so
Yeah.
that's probably why, but again, it doesn't mean that we can't think about how we're supporting it. But as a reminder, it's like, this is just the allocation that we already had. And so moving forward with that for this year, but then beginning to think we need to reassess or readjust that allocation as we move.
That like stood out to me because they're attached to Sherman and I think Sherman is on here.
Mm.
So when we talk about allocation, is there some way to utilize the buildings that are attached?
It's
Oh,
kind of hard though, because even though buildings are the same, like their schedules are different, especially like those when you have like a high school and a middle school. So schedules are different, how they are. So that individual who might be at Sherman is also at another school. And so it's not easy for them just to, because some of them are already going between two schools. And so it's hard for them just to be able to say, yes, you can just go right there to Shabazz, right? So it definitely is an allocation.
Mhm. Yeah, we just don't have the FTE to, expand out any pretty tight as is. That makes.
I was thinking, I was at O'Keefe last week and they have a person who, like, that's kind of their go-to for the school. And they were actually presenting earlier this year too, and so they had a really interesting way of how they funnel a lot of people to a person who's able to then communicate directly with people. And then it's a really popular way, and it's going very well in order to do it that way. Is that something that you're tapping into as well, and maybe utilize that as a?
I certainly will. I know the principal very well, and so would love to learn more about that. I haven't heard specifically about that, but
Okay.
I definitely will check in about it now. He's on my enrollment strategy too, so
Okay.
make sure to tap in.
Oh, great. Yeah, no, something's working, like utilize the capacity to connect with families and someone who's already kind of housing that role. I think it's great when we can do that. I'd like how you said that the ombudsperson is also someone you connect with. What does that look like?
Yeah, that's great. So we work with Anna. So she is right now utilized as a resource for our student engagement specialists. So if they have a student with an IEP or 504 plan, being able to kind of utilize her as a resource to give to families for additional supports. And another way that we are collaborating with Anna, so as we're sort of building out our family university sort of sessions or tracks, if you will, utilizing some of her work that she's already doing, not necessarily reinventing the wheel, but kind of pulling that stuff into our offerings that we can provide to families.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
I think that kind of might lead into like the last thing I had that I'd written down is that there was I remember what slide it was towards the end. And it was reshaping MMSD partnerships connected to FICE. Is that something that is new? Is there specific partnerships that you're focusing on?
There is actually. And so an example of that is, so Matum, if you've heard of the program. Yep. you have STEM stuff. They also provide internships, things like that. CEOs of Tomorrow is another one. So these are partnerships that have existed. So I've worked with strategic partnerships. And so one of the things that we hope to do is increase the curricular opportunities for our middle schoolers to give them more to sort of latch onto or find things to engage in, develop interests. And so we've actually worked now to develop that partnership to where we're offering that specifically for our middle schools to increase some of those offerings that we'll have. And then we'll utilize our student engagement specialists to kind of usher in and support those community programs coming into our middle schools. And like, just for example, CEOs of Tomorrow primarily worked with middle schools previously. I'm sorry, elementary schools previously. So that's just an example of like a shift.
Okay. Awesome. Also be excited to see what you hear from me next year, like where those connections go to. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, Board Member Vandermeulen.
One, I want to thank you for your experience. I think that you being a student in the Madison Public Schools is very, very important. And I think that is necessary. I too was quite fond of Adam's work. I think he will continue it very nicely. My questions are as follows. One, on disability, I'd like and you don't have to answer this now, but in the future, if you could just write up how you and Anna can increase the number of students with disabilities, especially regarding attendance, because oftentimes disabling conditions can affect a student with disabilities attendance, and I find that really interesting, and I think that you could do some good work there. Additionally, I know I looked at the org chart and then also looked and you stated about workbooks about the workbooks and the employment and that and your FTEs. Um, I'd love to talk to you further on that privately just to try and figure out how the best way to do it is. But my question is this: how exactly, what would you think that you would need to make FICE work?
So, Board Member, I'm actually gonna take this on just first to just kind of lean in on the workbook question. I think we believe that there are already some existing opportunities for us to grow, but there are just some conversations that we need to have before having a public conversation around them and how we can see this department growing with some current positions. So I just want to say like, that's where Tyson is going, but because again, there are just some private conversations that need to be had to see if these are viable options before we can have those conversations publicly. And I think
I appreciate that.
yeah, and I think as far as like what one of the things that he is looking for is something that he's asked for a number of different times. But how do we are able to really grow the capacity of the department so that we can grow by growing the capacity of the individuals that work within the department. When you look at his chart and look at the number of students that are working with, it is just the ratio of the adults to students is just a little off balance. And so I think about if we're able to address it in the first way, I believe like there are just some good wins that are already out there that exist, but just those conversations we can have.
And then I have two more questions, Chair, if I may. One, will your work replace like Village Builders and some of the community work, or will that be separate?
No, it will not replace. I think, and not to speak for Tyson, but I think one of the things that Tyson has done also is by finding ways to partner with some of our existing positions, our parent liaisons, our village builders. How are we working to make sure like a lot of our work is not being duplicated? Because that's something that he did observe, like a family liaison is kind of doing the exact same thing we're asking for our SCSs. How do we work together more in partnership to do that work? And so that's one of the things that he's discovered over the first year.
That I don't want to, I'm glad we're not losing them, but at the same point, I'm not sure I want to put everything on someone new without working with the others. So I'm glad you're working on collaboration. I think that would be a good way of doing it. So I appreciate that. I look forward to it. Also, would love to have any of the info that you have on the department and your ideas on how to grow it. So just love to have conversation with you. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
All right. Board Member Pearson?
Thank you. Thank you, Tyson, for hanging out with us after a late session here. I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing your story as well.
Yeah.
That takes a lot. My question is I have just one question. And it's around our MSCs. And so I've interacted with many of them over the years, and appreciate the work that they all do. My question is just around, so for instance, if there is a MSC who is at the middle school, they transition with some of those students into the high schools, for instance. And say, since we're changing. Yeah.
MSCs are in high school, they're not in.
I mean, yes.
So SESs are.
SESs, that's what I meant. Sorry. SES, thank you.
Yep.
Acronyms, right? I love acronyms in government and things, right? The question is around, as students are transitioning into high school, and now that we're shifting, thank you for changing the word of caseloads. But for right now, caseloads are shifting based off of attendance. How does that impact the students who have built those relationships with those folks? Kind of where does that lie? Because many of the students that these folks are working with, they have built beautiful relationships with those students. And attendance is one indicator of where we need to have impact and meet students where they're at. But say that student no longer needs that support around attendance and being and belonging, but that person has become their person. Can you speak to me like how that kind of like work with that tension between students not being on the caseload and students matriculating off of the caseload?
Yeah, absolutely. So the caseload structure as I came into it wasn't very clearly defined. But there were some parameters not necessarily followed. One of those is that the caseloads will sort of be from 8th grade and 9th grade. So they'll carry a student for 2 years.
Okay.
So like moving forward, so when this is implemented, they'll still carry forward their 8th graders that are going into 9th grade. And so they'll still have those students and there'll be room for maybe a couple additions. And then they'll kind of bring in that next group. I think that's one question that I actually was asking myself is, what is the process if we're working with a student and all of a sudden do really well and it seemingly don't need the support anymore? And I think I've come to the conclusion that that doesn't mean that we're going to take away the support. So the expectation is that SESs will remain with students for 2 years. And they'll maintain that caseload. And I think part of that graduation, so to speak, we're looking to implement sort of a cohort model to where the SESs at high school can actually, we've developed sort of programming framework where they can actually bring back down to their newer caseloads as they like to become sophomores, juniors. And we've implemented like leadership opportunities. For them to come back, having a lunch, buy some pizzas, bring them in, icebreakers and some activities together, teach, learn, give like kind of the 411 on what the younger kids need to know about being in high school, things like that. So we've developed some things like that in terms of program opportunities in anticipation for that growth. But another thing that our SESs should be doing, and it's extremely important to me, is I say we should be the plug. We should be the connector for our students, meaning we don't want, I kind of highlighted it in my kind of introduction, saying that it takes one adult or one person to kind of lean in or believe in someone. That's not always going to be me necessarily, just because I'm an SES. And so part of our job is to connect students in other positive programming with other positive adults, hoping that one of the adults might be able to make that sort of click, so to speak, for some of our students. And so I strongly encourage and support my staff building resources for them to utilize. We messed around with sort of gems, and basically they can go in and type in then all the resources for any sort of programming that are local. They can go in there and they can find them and provide those to the students. But it's really being that building the community around each student. That's my phrase for that term. You know, our job is to build a community around each student that we serve, so that they have multiple avenues of support.
Okay. Well, that's great to know. And again, like I said, kudos to continuing to work. Because the spaces I've been in have been beautiful to watch our students be really engaged. So
absolutely.
I appreciate the work of those folks that show up for our students and their families, including myself. So yeah, and I guess just quick, like if there was something that you would like the board to know of, like support, if there's like a wish list thing. I know sometimes we ask that of folks, like if we had unlimited resources. We don't, but if we had unlimited resources, like what that would look like to support like your work and your vision moving forward.
Absolutely. I will certainly put that wish list together for you.
Okay, thanks.
Well, it looks like we don't have any further questions. I just want to also thank you. I enjoyed getting to know more of your work and how you're structuring the work meeting in preparation for tonight's presentation. I think the one thing that really stood out to me is that, and I just want to say it, not because board members don't remember, but I think it's just important. Like, we made an investment in village builders and more family liaisons a couple of years back. And that became an intentional strategy to make more of our schools community schools, right? And so there was a real intentionality a couple of years ago around if you could add those additional roles to those schools, they could start to embody and have more of the ability to do things like community schools do. Really strong family engagement, really strong student engagement, and coordinating more resources for support. And then we also made this critical investment in the student engagement specialists. And at the time, I remember when we made that investment, that was a little separate from the village builders and the family liaisons, but it was seen as a necessary move to really bridge middle school to high school. And that had been a real gap in our system. And so it's great. And I know a couple of you mentioned Adam Clausen kind of presenting on that. That was early in its development. And so it's really great that you're able to come back in now and talk with more granularity about like what those student engagement specialists are really doing, some of the pain points, but also where you're seeing like some promise. And so, you know, it feels super rewarding to me to remember that like we've made some really good investments. I know sometimes we often only talk at like the maybe the classroom teacher level in terms of like our allocations and things like that. And we've also made some really good investments to support our students in these other ways too. So thank you for the update. And I'm also looking forward to all of the family engagement work starting to get built out more. Yeah, so welcome aboard.
Thank you so much.
Yes. All right, y'all. Well, with that, we've had a robust policy discussion tonight, an amazing introduction to Tyson and Family Youth and Community Engagement, and I will take a motion to adjourn.
moved.
Second.
Okay, there were so many making that motion. Justin, who made the motion?
I did.
Nikki.
Okay, Board Member Van Muellen, thank you. And seconded by Maya Pearson. All those in favor, aye. Adjournment.
Aye.
All right, and I think Claire's on already.
I'm still here, but
Oh,
Thanks,
Claire, thank you.
Goodbye.